and it is 7 o'clock. President Ziegler.
Hello, I'd like to call the meeting to order. The approval of the agenda is the first item on the agenda. One thing I'd like to add to the agenda is to discuss the COVID in-person meetings, when they'll start and what preparations they have. Administrator Jeffrey, do you have a preference for when we talk about that?
Not at all, President Ziegler, wherever you'd like to put it.
Well, in case we have to take an action, let's put it in the action items. At the bottom of the list then. So that would be H.
Mr. President, maybe just for the sake of the recording and the remote meeting, if we could just do a roll call of managers present.
Yes. Please proceed.
Manager Crafton,
Here, present.
Manager Duval,
Present.
Manager Cook,
Present.
Manager Pedersen,
Present.
President Ziegler.
Present.
All managers present.
Okay, very good.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook.
on that note of COVID, I think for the record, be appropriate to note that we are conducting this meeting by Zoom out of abundance of caution due to the COVID pandemic.
Yes, I think that's adequate, right? I don't have to repeat it.
I don't think you do.
Okay, good. Is there any other agenda issues or changes?
Yeah, Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I would like to remove from the consent agenda items B through I and item M.
Okay, anything else, Manager Cook?
No, no, I think I'll cover those, some of those items later on when we get to them.
Okay. Do any other managers have changes or additions to the agenda?
No, but I'll move we accept the agenda as amended.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept the agenda as amended. Any further discussion? Hearing none, can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the agenda is approved as revised. The next item is the matters of public interest. Welcome to the board meeting. Anyone may address the board on any matter of interest in the watershed. Speakers will be acknowledged by the president. Please, still says come to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. Additional comments may be submitted in writing. Generally, the Board of Managers will not take official action on items discussed at this time, but may refer the matter to staff for further report or direct that the matter be scheduled on a future agenda. Okay, do we have anyone from the public? I see someone raising their hand.
Hi, I didn't see
Hi.
the raising hand function.
Well, using your actual hand still works.
Hi, everyone. I am Maya Santa Maria. As you can see, I'm enjoying the beautiful day out here at Duck Lake. And we just saw some incredible swans enjoying the lake, and then they flew off, which we don't see very often, and a loon. So we're really enjoying watching all of the activity. I am the president of the Duck Lake Association, and our association is really excited to be able to take advantage of some of the opportunities that are here for the lake associations. We were at the meeting yesterday, 3 of us, Rod, Jill, and myself from our board. Really enjoyed, we thought it was a wonderful summit. We look forward to future ones, very informative. And our board is very interested in moving forward with the process of establishing a lake management plan. And we wanted to let the board know that, and that, you know, we hope that you'll take that into consideration moving forward to, you know, try to start working on getting the appropriate steps and get the process rolling. It's a very active board. We're very interested in being collaborators and partners with the watershed and stewarding Duck Lake, and we'd love to get started with the process. So if that could be something that we can begin that relationship and begin the process, we would love that. And also the second thing I wanted to bring up is that we would love to be able to put the culvert or the inlet on Duck Lake on the agenda, so that we could hopefully once and for all work on raising the water levels. We've written a letter to your board, as you all know, and expressing the almost unanimous desire of everyone that lives on this lake and enjoys the lake, that we would like to have that inlet adjusted so that the lake levels can go back up. And so if we could get that on the agenda, we'd be really appreciative. So those are the 2 things I wanted to bring to the board. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I'm going to be listening in and continuing enjoying this afternoon. So thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Mr. Jeffrey, are you gonna make note of adding to a future meeting, or investigating and getting an estimate for the price for the lake plan?
President Ziegler, managers, yes. We already have, I met with Joe Bischoff and Engineer Sobiak 2 weeks ago. Joe Bischoff will be putting together a scope and prospective cost for lake management plan that will be coming to the board at a future meeting.
Yeah, I'm hoping it won't be too expensive, because obviously there are similar lakes in the watershed that already have plans, like Red Rock Lake, for example.
Well,
I know no 2 lakes are alike.
well, President Ziegler and managers, I'd also like to remind you, this will be a little different than the ones that we had done in the past. The one in the past has been really just a vegetation management and AIS control plan. This is looking at a whole lake plan, looking at the outlet, looking at the watershed coming in. But we'll go into that in more detail. I have asked that they prepare the scope in such a way that it is somewhat a la carte, so that we can select items if in fact the overall sticker shock is too much. So
Okay.
Excuse
Do
me,
any
President.
Manager Cook?
First of all, I mean, maybe my memory's failing me. Did we specifically authorize staff to engage in drafting a lake management plan? I don't
No,
even know
we're
what it entails.
We're talking about finding out how much it would cost to do that. So until we know what the cost is, we can't really vote on it.
Well, you know, I'm a little concerned that we have people running off and doing things and they're not authorized by the board and they're not provided in the budget. And so items like this, in my opinion, should be brought to the board. The board should decide whether or not they want to have staff look into it at all. And if that is a decision by the board, then direction should be given to staff. And at least preliminarily, there should be a comeback with this is what a response or memo or discussion of a lake management plan would entail, and this is what it would cost to provide that memorandum and that information. I think we've skipped a whole step here based upon what I have heard. That is not the way I think we should be operating, this district, especially since, one of the board members, yourself included, lives in the Duck Lake area. Nothing intended personally, but the same thing would happen with Lotus Lake, I would expect. I would expect that we would go through these processes step by step. First of all, finding out what would be entailed, what would it cost, to do this, and then we, the board, decide if we're going to do it, where's the money going to come from. And then step two is if we decide we want to go forward and have a plan drafted, then that would be a subsequent decision to be made.
President
So
Ziegler.
just a quick reminder, we have talked about this issue multiple times, and we're doing exactly what you are suggesting. We're going to find out what the cost will be for a plan for the lake,
Well,
and then
Mr. President,
move on from there.
I'll let Mr. Jeffrey, and then I have a further comment on this.
President Ziegler, Manager Cook, and managers, at the, I believe it was either last meeting or 2 meetings ago, we were talking about the outlet for Duck Lake and the different options for it. At that meeting, what the board had directed was rather than focus on just the outlet, to look at a whole lake management plan. So that was the direction that the board gave at that time. That is what we're looking to bring back to the board, is the cost associated with the whole lake management plan.
Well, Mr.
Thank you,
President,
Administrator Jeffrey. Yes.
do we have a resolution that we adopted to do that?
President Ziegler, Manager Cook, no, it was a motion made at the meeting.
No, well, excuse me. The motion wasn't therefore adopted. We didn't approve it. This surmising of what we did is insufficient. It's a bad practice. We want to take steps, especially if it involves spending money. We need to go and adopt a resolution so everybody knows, and not just some people know, what is going to be entailed in doing that.
President Ziegler?
Manager Crafton.
Yeah, I was wondering, since we're in the public interest section, if anybody else wanted to speak, or is Maya the only one?
That's a good question. Is there anyone else who would like to speak from the public? Do we have any questions from any of the other managers or any of the managers for the president of the Duck Lake Association?
Well, Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I just wanted to thank, is it Santa Maria? I'm sorry, I know people with Spanish surnames, they're different, so I apologize on that basis. So, but thank you for taking an interest, in the watershed and your lake, and as well, and I'm sure you're interested in all the lakes, in the district. And I really do appreciate the public's participation, letting us know their thoughts, because we're here to serve the constituents. So I just want to say thank you very much. Appreciate your input. I hope I feel I represent all the constituents, so I hope nobody takes this as a affront to anybody when I ask questions, but I feel I have to be fair to all the constituents and ask what I think are appropriate. So I hope you understand where I'm coming from with my discussion.
Yes, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And, just on behalf of the board, we don't know how the process goes, but we're very interested in learning how the process goes. So whatever we need to do to get through your processes, we are here to work with you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on the agenda looks like it was
Set 'em up with that one.
recently added, the presentation by Core Trust Bank. Prior permit application 2020-029. Is that correct, Terry?
That's correct, President Ziegler. Mr. David Knavely is here representing Core Trust Bank. They came to us in 2021 with a proposal to redo their parking lot. There was floodplain fill that wasn't a net zero mitigation for that. Permit was denied at that time. Mr. Knavely has asked for the opportunity to speak to the board about that project on behalf of his client.
Mr. Knavely, please proceed.
Commissioner Ziegler, members of the board, thanks for having us today. My name is David Knavely. I'm an engineer with the firm Civil Site Group. Yeah, here representing Core Trust Bank, which owns the property located at 4625 County Road 101 in Minnetonka. And as stated by Mr. Jeffrey, we came to the board back in May of 2020, or we presented a proposal to the board in May 2020 to reconstruct our site here, which some history on it. The site was constructed in 1998. And it was built at the time above the existing floodplain elevation. The site itself has poor soils on it. So at the time the building was built on piles, but the rest of the parking lot and the surrounding site features were not. And throughout the last 25 years, the site has settled, and it's settled from a point where it was above the floodplain to now the site is below the floodplain. The owners are hoping to redo their parking lot because of quite a few substantial issues out here. And as part of that application, we know we've got to go to the board for a variance for floodplain and also a variance for some wetland buffer requirements. So back in 2020, we brought a proposal to the board. We got approval on our buffer variance request, but we did not get approval on our floodplain request. So since then, the site kind of has continued to be getting worse and worse to the point almost where the site's not usable by the tenants anymore. And I'd like to, if hopefully this works and everybody can see it, I'd like to share my screen and go through some pictures of the site. Is everybody able to see that?
Yes.
All right, so this is the site itself here, looking towards the east, the existing building up on piles. Standing water sitting in the parking lot here. There's wetlands located on the south side of the site, basically surrounding the site. South, east, and then north and west of this parking lot is all wetland area. You can kind of see, and we'll go through as we go through some of these pictures, that the site has settled substantially. So right now there's standing water that sits in the parking lot that never drains away because of the settlement. Can't get to the catch basins on site and drain to the stormwater pond that was constructed as part of the original project back in 1998. So all of the water that sits here, it sits in the parking lot and then just flows on larger events directly into the wetland without providing any treatment. So some of the issues, the sidewalks and stuff in front of the building are all settling. There's huge joints and cracks in the pavement that you can see, and you'll see kind of a little more clearly as we go through these pictures that there's huge lips, and it's unsafe out here for employees who work at the bank and also the public who uses the bank. You can see here curb where it was sitting on piles is up at the original elevation. Stuff that was off the piles is settled quite a bit. So there's huge breaks in the pavement itself. You can see this fire hydrant used to be buried all the way up. This is where the settlement is the worst, right in this entry area. Dirt used to be up at towards the bottom of the red on the fire hydrant. So it's settled almost 2 feet, it looks like, in some of these areas. As we flip through these, again, huge heaves and cracks and stuff that's just not safe for anybody out here. Here you can see the dirt again. These are the foundations for the light poles when they were originally constructed. You can see a couple of these. So you can see how much everything's just dropped. These used to be substantially buried out here, and this is the worst area. This is where the flooding is the worst, right here at the entry. This is looking west towards 101. So standing water out here, just mucky, not good. This is the hydrant itself, sticking way out of the ground now. That never was like that when it was originally built. And then this is from a recent rainfall event, what this area looks like. It's all just completely flooded. Vehicles can't go in and out. Again, this stormwater, when it comes in here, it's got nowhere to go except directly to the wetland. So a lot of issues. So, the biggest thing is, the owners care about kind of life safety stuff for the employees and the public. They want to try to get their ADA access back again. And they, ideally would have the site functioning where it was designed to treat stormwater runoff, clean it, and discharge it to the wetland, which it currently isn't doing. So they're trying to amend that, and they're trying to do that by proposing to raise the parking lot back up to what it was originally designed and approved at back when it was built in 1998. So here's a this is the original plan. The whole parking lot, the floodplain elevation back in 1998, they determined it to be at 886.5. All of the parking lot was well above that, about an 888. So a couple feet higher, the building at 889. So 2.5 feet higher than the floodplain. Now, when you look at the survey that's out there, they have updated their floodplain models a little bit. The floodplain elevation went from an 886.5 to an 886.45. So 5 hundredths. It's been updated since it was originally calculated, but still very similar to when it was originally approved. You can see some of these grades in here at 885.13 when it was originally, an 888. So almost 3 feet of drop in this worst area here. And again, all of this area that originally you can see in this plan where the pond is on the east side of the site, all of this water used to originally flow into some catch basins on the south side of the site and the north side of the site, discharge into the stormwater treatment pond, then discharge to the wetland. Now that everything is so low, the pipes themselves don't even drain back that way. They're too low to do that. So the water just discharges right into the wetland. That's here. So over the last 2 years, working with Core Trust Bank, we've been looking at options to try to amend the plan and modify our site plan that we put together, but we haven't really been able to find a path forward that meets the needs of the building and then avoids the needs for these variance requests out here. One change we're looking at making, which would help a little bit, is we can try to reduce some impervious area out here at the south and east side of this site for this drive lane that comes around the back of the building, which would help a little bit in terms of, stormwater flow that discharges to the pond out here, and also help a little bit with providing some additional floodplain. But it's really a drop in the bucket in terms of how much floodplain was created over the last 25 years from this settling to what we can provide by eliminating this. But that's something we're definitely looking at doing. So at this point, we believe what we had provided previously and what we're planning on providing again coming up is reasonable, but we're looking for some recommendation and guidance from the board on our best path forward before we finalize our application out here. So if you guys have any thoughts, input that you can provide us on moving forward and trying to get this site back up to compliance and making it usable again, we'd appreciate any feedback you have.
Engineer Sobiak, I understand that you've at least taken a preliminary look at this. Is that correct?
President Ziegler, managers, we took a look at it back in 2020 and made a recommendation at that time. From what I'm understanding from Mr. Knabely is the design is essentially the same with really no changes. So we're still looking at a shortfall in the compensatory storage. And like he had mentioned, there would also need to be a variance from the buffering requirements. Over the last couple of years, I know Mr. Knably and I have had several conversations, batting around various ideas, options, putting in retaining walls, reducing imperviousness like he had mentioned. So that's where we're at.
President Ziegler.
Manager Patterson.
So, Scott, I drive past the site all the time. It's very close by where I live. And I have never seen the parking lot with more than 3, 4, maybe 5 cars in all the times I've ever passed it. Why could they not decrease the amount of the parking area, put in some sort of pervious pavers? I mean, really, there's quite a bit they could do to decrease the pervious section of this by replacing it with an impervious paver base, correct?
Pervious pavement may be an option out there. I don't know how the subsoils are, if it would support it and allow the infiltration to happen. Maybe that's something Mr. Knably knows more about. In terms of the standing water, I have not observed standing water like this on the site, but I will be frank, I haven't been out there after there's been a large rainfall event either. So now, Mr. Knably, I know you had mentioned that the way the site currently is sitting, it's not draining to the stormwater facility. If I remember correctly from 2020, and I could be wrong, isn't there a catch basin actually on the south side of the site that was always intended to take some of that area directly into the wetland? Or was that added later because of the standing water problem?
No, correct. That was added at the time. When the surveyors went out there to shoot the existing catch basin, I think it was all filled in and so it wasn't functioning. So the catch basin itself isn't draining. They weren't able to get down to measure the invert. I think it settled, and the pipe that ran east-west is no longer going that direction. And the invert or the surface itself is kind of higher than, I think, or not higher than the pipe that's discharging out, or it's not able to discharge out. So we'd have to raise this back up to the original grades to get it so it can drain properly to the east. I don't know what happened to the pipe there. I guess that's hasn't been explored super thoroughly, but looks like it's not functioning as designed.
Mr.
So,
President,
Manager Cook.
but were you going to say something, Mr. Sylvia? Or
President Ziegler, Manager Cook. Yeah, I was going to ask Mr. Knably another question, but go ahead, Manager. I can hold my question.
well, I guess my point is, I'm at the point, thank you for the presentation. I think that the landowner needs to make a proposal. We can only act on proposals. Once that proposal starts, then, that's the point where the district authorizes the engineer to evaluate and tell us, do you meet the rules or don't meet the rules? And they make recommendations. We're, at least I'm not in a position to agree to anything because although I see your picture, that's why we have an engineer to provide us with their view of the engineering on this site and whether or not what the landowner proposes is within the rules. And I have some vague recollection, I could be totally wrong, that there were some proposed changes to what exists. And I thought that was one of the problems. And it seems to me that there would be a way to solve the problem, at least for some period of time, that I would guess could come within our rules. I don't know whether that involves, concrete retaining walls, a subterranean basin, catch basin. I'm not the engineer on that basis, but I know we've seen other projects now where subterranean base catch basins, et cetera. But I guess my overall concern, that being said, what stops this parcel from continuing to, to settle? And, I don't think it would be a good idea for us to approve anything that in another 10 years or something, we're back at the, at the same point. And therefore, it would seem to me that there would have to be some extensive piling, concrete driveways, concrete catch basins, and I'm talking off the top of my head, not being an engineer, but I do have a science background. So I think it's incumbent upon the owners to come back, look at our rules, come back and say, this is what we can do to comply with your rules. And it sounds to me like it's going to be expensive, but unfortunately that goes with the property. So those are my comments.
President Ziegler.
Manager Crafton.
Yeah, I share some of Manager Cook's concerns. If the building's on pilings, it sounds like this was built on a wetland. And if you got saturated soils, then there's a real problem here. So the future, like Manager Cook was just referencing, was, I'm not sure it wouldn't keep settling. But it sounds like this was built on a, if you got to put a building on pilings, it sounds like it was built on a wetland. So you got an issue from the get-go. And so what do we do? I mean, what's the solution to that?
Thank you. Engineer Sobiak, you had a comment?
President Ziegler, managers, I was just going to see if Mr. Knably could show what, at this point, what their proposal was in terms of mitigating some of that floodplain loss, if you have that plan.
Yeah, I don't have, let me see.
And that's fine. I was just,
I may not be
curious
able to
if you
pop
had
it up.
something.
No, because originally all of the floodplain that was on this site was outside the perimeter of the parking lot, was all outside of the site development area. Now, after it's settled over the last 25 years, the floodplain is the parking lot itself. So what we were proposing was just going back to the original design, which is here, which is basically the curbs all in the same locations that they were previously. And then just pushing the floodplain out to outside the parking lot like it was originally intended. But it doesn't, as we know, meet the floodplain rules as currently understood by the district.
And to Manager Cook and Manager Crafton's point, it doesn't sound like that plan would prevent it from sinking more and, being a problem again.
We've had discussions previously, sorry, President Ziegler. We've had discussions previously with the geotechnical engineer for the site, and they do feel like the site has, or they're hoping that the site has settled and it's slowing down, and that as part of the project, when we remove some of the weight of the soil out here, they could backfill with some lighter material, which would reduce the rate of settlement out here so that it shouldn't be a problem in the future, is the direction from the geotechnical engineer. We can provide, when we go in at time of permit, some of that information from them.
One of the other points that Manager Cook made was, normally applicants work with our engineer, and the engineer then makes a recommendation to the board, which, if there's nothing else that can be done, then the engineer may or may not recommend a variance be approved. But typically we're looking at the engineers and his team of engineers to be our technical resource to help us understand, going forward, is this a long-term sustainable solution? So I guess what I'd like to see is, and other managers can chime in, but some additional work with the engineer and, understand what are the options on this particular site. And, we go from there. Do any other managers have comments?
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I just want to follow up on your comment and reiterate it. I think that's the approach. Just from my perspective, I don't sit in Mr. Sobiak's seat, but if I did, I'd want to say, show me a plan that meets all of the requirements and either tell me it's impossible, and then we go from there. But if it's possible to be done, it seems to me it needs to be done. And that's where I would go. But I don't think it's incumbent upon the district to do the engineering. The proponent, permittee needs to submit a proposal for the permit and the appropriate fees. And then we take it from there and analyze what the proposal is. But as I just said, I think that, as I said, if I was sitting Mr. Sobiak's, I would say, show me a plan that's going to meet all the rules first and tell me why you can't do it. And then we'll go from there.
Do any other managers have comments?
Mr. President, President Ziegler,
Manager Dwell?
I would reiterate alignment with Manager Cook and Manager Crafton and others. It would seem like it would be incumbent on the owner of the property to devise a plan and not have the district be the one proposing the fix. And maybe maybe it was before my time here, but again, I think Manager Koch has outlined the proper procedure of our engagement of the watershed as well as our engineering staff to be reviewing plans that have been developed by the property owner. That's all.
Thank you. Administrator Jeffrey, is there anything you wanted to add?
President Ziegler, no, I have nothing further to add at this time. I think, well, I guess I would like to circle back to Mr. Bagley. Have you had any discussions with the city of Minnetonka about parking requirements on that site? Back to Manager Patterson's original question, is it possible to reduce the footprint and therefore get that compensation elsewhere?
Right now, the city would allow us to reconstruct the project as is without needing any additional approvals or entitlements through the city. They would just require a construction permit for us to go out here, demo the parking lot, bring in dirt, and then reconstruct it at that higher elevation. To reduce any parking would require entitlement process through the city because the project was originally approved with the parking that's provided currently. So it'd have to go back through city entitlement processes and may require additional variances or studies to reduce parking for this building size based on their code.
I have nothing else. Thank you, President Ziegler. David.
Okay, Mr. Knabely, thank you for your presentation, and I'm sure Engineer Sobiak looks forward to your communication with him and proposals.
Well, thank you, everybody, for the time. We appreciate it.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is reading and approval of the minutes The first set of minutes is for the March 1st regular meeting of the Board of Managers. Do we have any motions on this item?
I'll move approval of the minutes, but I've got one edit.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Manager Crafton, you said you have an edit.
Yeah, it's on page 13, line 11. Is his understanding the discussion the board proposes it is? I think you just need to strike it. That the discussion the board proposes is. That was all I found.
Do any of the other managers have revisions?
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
in keeping with our prior agreed process and procedure, I submitted changes and comments to Administrator Jeffrey. I don't know if they've been incorporated in here, but if not, then I move that my changes be incorporated into these minutes.
President Ziegler, Manager Cook, Manager Cook's comments were incorporated into the minutes that are located on the website right now. That is linked to. So they are highlighted in red, or they are written in red text with a note next to it stating whose comments they were.
So have the other managers had a chance to read through that? I guess I didn't realize that. Okay, I see at least one manager nodding their head that they've read through that. It's a little awkward. We're kind of accepting it, having not read the corrections or the changes. But as long as Manager Pedersen has read them, and she's this secretary, I guess I'll take her word for it that they're good.
I could also share President Ziegler, if you are so inclined, I could share the screen and scroll down through Manager Cook's comments.
If it's just a few, then sure, why not?
Okay, 1 second here. Make it bigger. Now I can't get to it. Okay. We'll go to the top. So his first one, as amended, that was an amended motion. He struck various discussions were and who participated in what. So when it comes to reappointed CAC members, this language was struck as such. Reports and minutes was added. Assurances upon receipt, struck and. For all its functions as he believes they are in place of is called for in the district bylaws. St. Hubert's Water Quality Project payment application number 2 contingent upon receipt from the engineer staff of a signed statement striking that and would never want to bring something to the client, struck a client, and he still holds that position that, and then he put in parenthetically, I assume that's what you meant, Manager Cook, representing both parties is a non-waivable conflict. I believe
That's it.
that is it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do managers Crafton and Pedersen accept the proposed changes as a friendly amendment?
Yes. As amended, yep.
Okay. Any other comments on the agenda or proposed changes? Hearing none, can we have a roll call vote on accepting the amended minutes for the March 1st regular meeting?
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the next item is the approval of the minutes for the March 16th work session of the Board of Managers. Do we have any motions on this item?
I'll move the minutes. I have an edit on page 6.
I'll second.
Okay, Manager Crafton, you said you have an edit.
I'm trying to find it. Second. What did I do with it? It was line 177 and stated it a really good, great start. It needs the word is in there. It stated it is a really great start.
Are there any other corrections or comments on the minutes for the March 16th work session? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. I'm assuming that this is also a friendly amendment. Okay. Can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Abstain.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1. 4-0 with one abstention.
Okay, the committee reports are next on the agenda. The first one is the Citizens Advisory Committee. Do we have a representative?
President Ziegler, Bonnie Nelson's here.
Yes, President Ziegler, members of the board, like to introduce myself. I'm a new CAC member. I'm Bonnie Nelson. I've lived in Chanhassen on the west side of Lotus Lake for 33 years with the Sunrise Hills Civic Association. There's about 55 homes in that. So I'm a neighbor of Manager Cook appears. I've recently retired from the Pollution Control Agency as a permit engineer and regulatory technical review for 33 years as well. So hoping that's of use with the board. We didn't have any new formal motions to present to the Board of Managers, nor were we aware of any new formal motions for us to follow up on. We did discuss in response to the Board of Manager discussion about recording meetings, made a formal decision to not record meetings for the CAC unless the board decides we should do so for some reason. We also, the board discussed how to collate all the past motions that the CAC has come up with that may not have been acted upon. And Marilyn has begun gathering a list, and there's a draft list on the CAC Google Drive in a motions folder, but we'll bring that to the CAC next month and talk about it and come up with hopefully a policy or procedure to how to interact with the board and take the initiative to remind the actions that we want highlighted for the board to work. That sound, thinking
That
that's
sounds good to me.
okay. And that the CAC should take the initiative to make sure things get followed up on. That's if it was our suggestion. Just a little update on the EHAP, whether it's the ecosystem or ecological health action plan, I think has to be determined. But myself and Jeff Weiss will be representatives on the technical advisory panel. We're sort of being the co-technical advisory committee members for the CAC. So we'll be attending those meetings over the summer before your workshop in August. And so case you have questions, we'll be working on that. And a few people are looking to develop a Friends of the Watershed Board, kind of a subgroup to have more of a regular event to get people into field work, like doing invasive species removal or something like that, but just to have a group that is actively has events going on an ongoing basis. So people who want to actually do some work can have an outlet to do that on a regular basis. And that would be the end of my notes.
Thank you. And welcome.
Thank you.
Do any other managers have questions or comments?
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I just want to say hi, neighbor, that I didn't know existed. So, that's number one. And but I wanted to state that I'm very pleased to see that the CAC is, acting upon, going to try to do a process to review and its prior suggestions, motions, et cetera, and hopefully, get us to address them one way or the other. So I thank the CAC for their efforts in that regard. Thank you.
I think I heard Manager Crafton, but I'm not sure. Did
Yeah.
you have a comment?
Manager Ziegler. So I'm planning to be at the CAC meeting this month. I think I signed up for that.
Good.
Great.
So looking forward to seeing more of you.
Good.
Any other questions or comments regarding the CAC? Okay, and someone's taken down that Manager Crafton is going to be at the meeting. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the receive the Personnel Committee report. Is there a Personnel Committee report? I think I saw the notes.
Yeah, there were minutes that were attached to the board packet.
Okay. So do we need to make a motion to approve those minutes, or is that a function of the committee itself?
I think that's the function of the committee itself.
Mr. President,
Manager
point of
Cook?
order. I believe the best practice is that the managers would receive the committee report, not approve it, but we receive it. And then it would be up to the board of managers to do whatever they thought would be appropriate with about it. But so that being said, I would move, I'd like to condense 6C and D and just move that we accept the Personnel Committee report and the Governance Committee report without further comment at this time.
I will second that motion, knowing I have no comments other than what was written on the Governance Committee. So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions or further discussion? Hearing none, can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager Duval,
Yes,
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes,
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is to receive the Audit and Finance Committee report. I didn't,
basically just, we have, Manager DeBell took some notes, and so we have his notes. I don't know. Those
Yeah.
were submitted.
So we skipped the Governance Committee report, President Ziegler?
It was
Manager Cook made a motion to approve both the
Oh,
Personnel Committee
okay,
report and
okay.
the Governance Committee report.
Okay.
So
So we don't, okay, so we don't have a, excuse me. We don't have a report for the board at this point, but just make a comment that we're continuing to work on, I guess, 4 basic items at this point, as well as a number of other things that are even earlier than that in our discussions. But we're continuing to evaluate the setup of how we would incorporate electronic signatures to pay checks for the watershed. We're continuing to do work on evaluating payment of monthly per diems and to consider payments for per diems to the recipients are receiving them on 1099s rather than as employees of the watershed. And we're continuing to work on making some changes to table 2 to try and get at some of the underpinning numbers so that we can track the 10-year plan on a more comprehensive basis and be able to go back and forwards with our current statements. And then I think the last item here is that I have in my notes to continue to work with Bar Engineering to incorporate their billing coding on projects so that we can track them directly to the projects that they're working on. So it's just a brief summary.
Thank you. Do any managers have questions or comments on the Finance Committee report? Okay, I'll make a motion to accept the Audit and Finance Committee report as verbally given by Manager Duval.
I'll second.
Excuse me. Sorry about that. Are there any other comments before we go to a roll call vote? Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
President Ziegler.
Manager Crafton.
So I guess the only other point is that we would really like to be able to start meeting in person. And so I'm assuming that we have to bring that to the board to get it on the agenda at the next meeting or maybe at the workshop meeting, but it would be easier to go over some of these things that we're trying to consider if we could do them in person. So, and we would like to include, you know, the auditors and accountants if possible too. Anyway, I just wanted to get that on your radar.
Okay, I think we can probably talk about that under item H that we added under the action items for the COVID prep for the office.
Okay.
Good. So the next item is the consent agenda. I think the remaining items were A, J, K, and I.
L.
I'm sorry, L.
Should be A, B, C. Then L.
Excuse me, Mr. President.
Manager Cook.
I believe I had removed the staff report and the engineer's report, B and C. I had removed B through I and also M.
Okay. So what's left to approve on the consent agenda is to adopt the resolution to approve the consent agenda as revised. Then adopt resolution. Yeah, JK and L. Adopt resolution 23-031. Adopt resolution 23-032 and adopt resolution 23-033.
That included the staff report too, right?
No, it did not.
No, it
Oh,
didn't.
okay, sorry. I just didn't hear you correctly. Thank you.
I'll move we accept the consent agenda as we just talked about.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or clarification? Can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, so the next items will be the items removed from the consent agenda. So starting at the top would be let me see,
Staff report.
the staff report, yes. So are there questions or comments on the staff report?
Yes, Mr. President.
Manager Cook?
Yeah, everybody would bear with me, please. Unfortunately, I have quite a few. So we're going up to the top, start at the top. Sorry. And I'm sorry, I could have maybe brought this up during the discussion on the Audit and Finance Committee, but let's start on page 1. Accounting, audit and budget. And the third paragraph under update. And it says that Red Path provide examples of other reporting from various watersheds. And so I'm curious what they were, and I would like to see them and provide my comments to the Audit and Finance Committee if appropriate. So that's the first item. And I wanted to understand in the 1, 2, I guess it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th paragraph, water-based implementation funding. I just wasn't sure what that means. Is that our normal budgeting?
So President Ziegler, Manager Cook, watershed-based implementation funding is.
Anybody have an answer?
Yeah, the one watershed, one plan. Am I muted? No, okay. One watershed, one plan for the metro area. So they allocate funds based on watershed boundaries, and those funds are to be spent in a way that is agreed upon by the 2 counties in our case and all of the communities involved. So the first meeting is a convene meeting to go through the eligible projects and decide upon those projects to be applied for as approved. So it's a grant funding that's comes through Bowser, and it must be in either a county groundwater management plan or identified in a watershed district plan.
So if I continue here, so if I understand it correctly, there's a meeting between 2 counties, is it? Is that what you said? You were cutting in and out a little bit, not your fault, but
I apologize. Yeah, so the 2 counties that are involved, as well as the communities that make up the district. So Deep Haven, Shorewood, Chaska, Chanhassen, Minnetonka, Bloomington, Eden Prairie.
so you go through and try to identify a project to send to Bowser to get the funding.
That is correct.
Okay, okay, thanks for doing that. And
Mr. President,
Manager Duval?
if I could answer Manager Cook's first question regarding other reports. We did receive a couple of other reports, and I guess from my perspective, and maybe Manager Crafton has another thought on it as well. They didn't appear to me to really respond to some of the things I think that we're trying to get at. And at least from my perspective, the notion of just changing the format of the reports is missing some of the underlying analysis I think that we're attempting to do in terms of trying to get at the 10-year plan and the table 2 that we've been using internally. So you're welcome to take a look at them, but it seems like it's premature to be looking at the format of the report before we figure out what kind of information we really want to have in the reports. That's my perspective. I don't know if Manager Crafton, if you have another comment or.
Yeah, President Ziegler.
Manager Crafton.
Yeah, so I asked our accountant, well, Nancy Martinson, to draft another format that I would like to see. But the problem is what Manager DeBell said. I mean, we're still looking at what some of the issues are and how they're represented on the financial statements. So it seemed premature to discuss format until we've worked through some of the other issues. So that's what we decided. But neither one of the reports that we received excited me at all. I didn't think they were as informative as some of the stuff that we've already discussed about doing. So.
Okay, Manager Cook.
Okay.
You had other things.
I do. I do. Thank you very much. On that basis, I don't know when you put together the report, but if we go down under administration, where are we vis-a-vis the applicants for the assistant position? And secondly, has an agreement been reached between our district and 9 Mile regarding the office sharing? Has that been finalized or not?
President Ziegler, Manager Cook, the position announcement closes on the 14th. We have received, I don't even remember, staff lock them. How many have received? Some of them are incomplete though, so will be discarded because they don't have a cover letter attached to them. But we have received at least 9 that I was aware of. It might be more. So it closes on Friday. The agreement has not been routed for signature as of yet. I need to circle back to Michael Welch and see where that is at.
Okay, but thank you. So if we go down to 2 items below that, working at Parks Director, the North Lotus Lake Stormwater Park. This isn't directly related, but does this involve any discussions of the Carver Park rebuild or proposals?
No, President Ziegler, Manager Cook, no, not directly. No.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to know if that was what was included. There on the top of the second page, there's an incomplete sentence, and I was wondering.
Yep. Thank you for the opportunity to complete it. I'm working with Engineer Sobek. On Thursday of last week, Jan Boyd sent me a ruling by the Minnesota plumbing inspector, head of that department, in which they made a ruling that surcharge or overfilling of stormwater pipe conveyance falls underneath the Minnesota plumbing code, and that would be suboptimal. Just put it that way. So I'm working with the engineer Sobek to prepare a response for that. Capital Region and others have already submitted responses.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I know that we have the item coming up on the work plan, and I'll wait for that point of view. The local, what is it, stormwater management plans? Is that what that is? In those plans, and I know that those plans expire. My point of raising this here is I think it's really important that we look at our rules as soon as possible as some of these plans are coming to an end, because I think that, well, I have issues I'd like to see us consider addressing in the rules. So I don't know what the schedule is for working on the rules, but we've been talking about it for quite a while, and I'd like us to move forward as quickly as possible this year.
If I may speak to that, President Ziegler, Manager Cook, all of our communities have deferred to the watershed district and just adopted our rules by reference. So even as we update our rules, theirs would update accordingly.
Okay. So they just adopt ours. That's what they've said. They just opted out and adopted our rules.
And defer to us and then send them to us to enforce those rules.
But they have that time period, right? The legislature gave them that we can't go change the rules on them any more often than, what is it?
That is correct. I forget what that time frame is.
10 years or
Oh, yeah.
well, and just that it's coming up, and if we're going to change something, I think we need to look at it and get it changed, so we don't have to wait another 10 years. So that was my point for that. Sorry, thank you. Yeah, under regulatory program, like your fourth paragraph, staff Nicolay, but doing the inspections. I mentioned this before. I'd like staff to consider whether it makes any sense to, on a permit, to go to the site and say, here are, pick your number of points that we want you to take a picture every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or when we call you, and send it to us, rather than have Mr. Nicolay go out twice a week, maybe once a week, maybe every other week, and time's money. And the site people are there all the time, right? And that doesn't mean we shouldn't have ad hoc inspections, just to make sure everybody stays honest. But I'd like to see staff consider something using the technology, getting more information, and saving some time. So that's just the comment.
Managed Cook, that actually, so we are starting to, we're looking at convening meetings with the various cities that do inspections. Eden Prairie has a self-reporting inspection program. So I wanted to meet with them to see what their experience with it has been, and see if there's something we can adopt there. I think another efficiency that we can get is if we know that, for instance, Carver County goes out and inspects the Avienda site regularly. So that's something that we don't need to inspect as regularly. So if we can coordinate those schedules, I think we can realize another efficiency there as well.
Okay, I appreciate that. So hopefully you can come away with, saving time, and instead of on the roads, actually fixing problems or making sure people are complying. I'd appreciate it if you can get a copy of Mr. Nicolay's grading system and what that entails, if that would be possible, and make that part of our permitting report. I think that would be a great, I'd like to see that in here. So.
President Ziegler, Manager Cook, that he came back to me with that. He met with the Metropolitan Regulatory Group, and it's all the watershed district permit inspectors got together. And there are a number of different watersheds that are using that system. So it's really in the infancy. We're just taking what they have and seeing if we can adopt it to ours. But a real good way of really what it would look at is things such as the immediacy of a threat to a resource, and the egregiousness of it. Is it a post broke on the silt fence, or is it an entire length of silt fence fencing? So we look at a number of different factors. But yes, we'll bring that back to the board for
okay, because I think ultimately that that information, and I'll talk about it later, should be going into the annual report in some way, manner, shape, or format. So I'll talk about that later. There's no sense going that again. So if we go to aquatic invasive species, we talked about the winter kills, and getting the, I guess, DNR to go, put more fish in there. We're concerned about that because of the carp, right? We like the bluegills, they eat the eggs. If I understand it, that's the process. That's the maintenance process.
President Ziegler, Manager Cook, that's exactly correct.
Yeah. So do we have any aeration? We have it on Starling, is it? But do we need to add it to someplace?
President Ziegler, Manager Cook, we have it on Rice Marsh Lake. The city of Eden Prairie maintains one on Round Lake. We certainly could look at if there's a benefit. right now our carp populations are under control. So there isn't as much need. Rice Marsh Lake was selected because of its recruitment. Staring Lake is our one lake that we really haven't gotten that under that 100 kilograms per hectare threshold that we'd like to, but it's a little different because there isn't an obvious nursery for that. The rec area is one, but we do have a barrier there. So it's certainly something we can begin to have internal discussions if there would be benefit to it.
I mean, I don't know. I assume the DNR pays for the stocking, but you know, if it costs them, it costs us, right? You know, somebody pays the taxes on that basis. I don't know if it made sense to do it. I just brought it up. If aeration would help. Because we could go with 1 year like when we had hardly any snow, and then this year we got feet of snow on the ice, which I understand makes a huge difference in survivability, but I don't know that much about it. So go down to cost share. Do we or do we not have a database, or are we still working on putting that database together?
President Executive Manager Cook, we do have a database. It still needs to be fully populated, but that is staff Forbes' next project to get on. So it is there. It does exist. We are able to retrieve data from it, but older grants, et cetera, have not been put into that system.
Yeah, I feel for these kinds of projects, you know, been involved in many of them, and kind of doing a go forward and go backwards as best you can. And I appreciate that. But I'm very interested in reports and seeing what's being done and who's doing it. And I think it might be helpful to other constituents looking at doing these projects. You know, they can see what's been done, you know, et cetera, if that's what's being involved. And I commend Mr. Risto and Ms. Torkelson about their plant list, and I assume they're taking advantage of the University of Minnesota Extension Agency or whoever else to provide input on that. I just throw that out there. I don't know if they are, but I know they have a lot of resources. Looking forward to seeing the 2-page overview of the grant program that staff Forbes, I believe, has prepared. So if you can provide that anytime it's ready, I appreciate that. I think that's a really good idea, by the way. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm just going through them. I don't want to spend time on something that really doesn't need to. If you go down to education and outreach, that's on page 6. So you're talking about the contact us form. Do we track who contacts us about what, and do we, you know, keep some information on that in database? And if we do, I think it would be interesting from time to time to get some type of a summary of who contacts us for what. It doesn't have to be very granular, I wouldn't think, but hopefully the database is such that it would generate a, you know, not too granular a report, so we have an idea what people are looking at going into that. You know, congrats on the Eden Prairie Home Garden and Landscape Show. It's great. It's like good attendance. I'm interested in seeing the Score Your Shore graphic, as I mentioned that. The one thing about education outreach, I don't know if it belongs here, but I might have missed it, but I didn't see anything in Chan's latest kind of quarterly publication from us about our stuff or what we do. And, you know, not to beat an old horse, but, or a dead horse, whichever one, you know, I think it would really be good if we get something important stuff in every one of these quarterly publications, be it Chanhassen, et cetera. So I really would like to see education outreach do that.
For this, want to get into all of the cities, yes.
Yeah. On that, I think it's really important. I think especially as you know, we have that issue in South Lotus Lake, somebody putting in riprap. I want to make sure nobody has an excuse saying, I didn't know. And that's, I think, one of the reasons, one of my motivations for getting that information out there. One, people know it, and then two, they can't have an excuse when it comes down to that. The groundwater conservation issue, we kind of went over that issue several years ago with the wells. I guess I have some doubts of whether it makes sense to come back on it. And the only other thing I said, I thought the state collected that information. I don't believe we should be collecting it twice. I may be wrong, but again, I don't know if there's much we can do about it, is my understanding, or whether it's worthwhile doing what we do. So maybe we could get a reporter comments on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, we would put together a report, President Ziegler, Manager Cook. This would be looking at, the state tends to look at deeper aquifers, the Shanes, the big, the Franconian, Ironton, Gailton ones. This would look at more of that near surface or till that would interact, that is the surface water, groundwater interaction, base flows and streams, wetland recharge, those types of things. What we're really looking at is just meeting with Evan Christensen, who developed the first groundwater surface water interaction report, looking at what Carver County's groundwater plan is, and then seeing if there is gaps or a way in which we can infuse ourselves with helpful information. So
I'd like to call the question. It's good information that you're going through, but it seems like we need to have a better way to communicate than doing it at a board meeting. This is a lot for anybody to sit through. So my question is, let's have a vote to call this, and we've got a lot of other things to go through yet. So I'd like to call the question, or call for a vote on the question of accepting the March staff report.
Well, excuse me, Mr. President, but I believe I have the floor, and calling the question is to cut off debate. We're not debating anything.
So what are we doing?
We're getting the information from the staff report.
It looks like you're getting information from the staff report, and the rest of us are sitting here. Now, it's good information, and maybe we need to know all of it, but I'm still calling the question.
Well, maybe I suggest, why don't you guys go take a break? If you don't want to sit there and want to get the information, go take a break, have a coffee, a latte, an iced tea, etc. I don't know, we may have no constituents out there, but it goes on the record. I think it's information that should be had, and you should know, and you should have the answers if we're going to do our jobs correctly. So if you think that the rules allow that, I have the floor, please.
No, you don't. I called the question. I want us to have lawyers. I would like to have our lawyer who we pay big bucks to tell me if I can call the question or not. Mr. Smith.
Mr. President, I think the appropriate thing would be for a board member to move to close the discussion of the staff report and call for a vote, but I don't think there's a motion to approve or accept the staff report yet on the floor.
So that's what I'd like to do then. I'd like to make a motion to close the discussion on the staff report.
Second.
Okay, we have a second, I believe. Manager Crafton got there first. Any further discussion from anyone about the closing the discussion on the staff report?
Yes, Mr. President. So I just want all of our constituents out there to know that apparently that the other managers don't want to take the time to obtain the information regarding what the staff has done and the details, since it isn't detailed enough. And I really can't expect it to be way more detailed, but maybe that's what it should be. I mean, I think I deserve to know that information than the constituents. fact that I just know it doesn't do necessarily any of the constituents any good on that basis. So, I mean, if that's how you guys want to do your duties, if you think that's doing your duties, you can vote the way you want to. I don't think that's what's expected of us in this case, especially given the amount of information provided in the staff report, which is good. But unfortunately, it doesn't have, you know, the specific detail that it has. Now, if you want to authorize me and pay me, you know, okay, outside of the meeting to contact Mr. Jeffrey or whomever and get the answers, and I'd be happy to post them even on a blog if that's the case, if you want to do it. But this is my opportunity to get this information and for the constituents to get the information.
Are there any other comments before we vote? Hearing none, can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager Duval,
Did we lose him?
We appeared to have lost him.
okay, Manager Cook,
No.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 3-1 with Manager Duval absent for the vote.
Okay, so I'd like to move on then to the
I think
engineers report.
we need to accept the staff report.
Oh,
So
yeah, you're
if we
I'm sorry.
accept the staff report.
Sorry, I got ahead of myself. So is there a motion on the staff report?
I'll move we accept the staff report.
second,
So we have a motion and a second on accepting the staff report. Any further discussion on this before we vote?
Tom's coming back, just so you know.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Tom is coming back.
Our power just flickered out and it's back on now.
Well, so Mr. President, then, in response to your question,
Manager Cook.
you know, as I said, I think it's within the interest of their constituents to go through this information on that basis. If you other managers decided you're not interested in that information, I guess that's for your decision, but I don't think that's that's certainly not the way I intend to operate on behalf of our constituents.
Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
On the motion to accept the staff report, Manager Crafton,
Can I make one
Yes.
comment, President Ziegler?
Manager Duval?
So I'm looking at this and it's 13 pages of detail of all these various things. And while I'm not critiquing Manager Cook's additional questions, we're getting a tremendous amount of detail on all the activities of the staff. And anyway, that's all I wanted to mention.
Thank you, Manager Duval. So can we proceed with the roll call vote, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager Duval,
Yes,
Manager Cook,
No.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the engineer's report. Is that correct, Mr. Jeffrey?
I move we accept the engineer's report.
I'll second,
Any discussion on the engineer's report?
Yes, Mr. President.
Manager Cook?
I mean, would this be the time for those who don't want to listen to take a break?
I think we're all very interested in it. It was just pointed out by another manager that we received reports on this, and you know, some of us want more detail than was in the reports. So
So those who
Manager
want
Cook?
that be damned, right? Is that what you think?
now is the time. Yes.
Well, apparently not, since you arbitrarily moved to cut off the discussion. Am I correct?
After 10 minutes plus, I didn't time it frankly.
You know, excuse me, but there are rules. And I suggest that maybe you look at the rules for handling these types of situations, but it's not my job to educate you or the rest of them. So let me, so the first thing that comes to mind under general services, paragraph C on page, I guess it is 1, yes. And talking about the future alum treatments, et cetera, in Lotus Lake. I mentioned this before. I am concerned and not in favor of any further alum treatments until we've done some further research to determine the impact of wake boats on the past alum treatment. And I would look to, well, it used to be Wank, and now Mr. Bischoff, is he not with Bar Engineering? So, you know, to get some report from the engineers as to what can be done to determine the impact. I note that, forget which staff it was it, I don't know, was it staff Dickhausen or who mentioned the fact that we had increased phosphorus readings in certain of the shallow areas. I speculated, I don't know for sure that that's as a result of the wake boat action, which are basically tsunami waves. I think we should figure that out before we go pour another $150,000 or $300,000 in doing another treatment. So that's my view. So let me go to item D. Can you tell me, I'm sorry, what a CIP project status matrix is?
Capital Improvement Program. So that's the projects that the district actually will construct. And it's a project matrix that is at the end of the the engineer's report that just lays out at what stage and what percentage a project is at in that various stage. Whether it's in the planning stage, design stage, ordering stage, construction stage.
And excuse me, where did you say that was?
It should be the last page in this report.
It didn't make it into this one. I don't know why.
I didn't see that. I think that's a terrific idea. I've made a comment about, I think that would be something would be great for us to see, you know, every report and even a Gantt chart for each one of our projects to show where we are on that. I mean, most of the projects, you know, that I'm involved with, my clients are involved with, they use Gantt charts so they can judge where they're at or where they should be at, et cetera. And I'd like to see us use those. So if you could incorporate those in your reports, Mr. Sobiak, I think that would be terrific. The next thing.
Scott did provide it. He provided an updated engineer's report. I didn't get it into the packet. I'm looking for it now. If you continue on and bring it up for you.
Okay, well, we won't have time to, you know, examine it at this point. Something I can cover before. I just was kind of curious as on E is why we have both Mr. Smith and Mr. Welch at the planning for the Board of Managers meeting. Seems to me one would be able to do it. But.
President Ziegler, the managers. In most cases, one could. Sometimes, though, since Mr. Welch reviews the permits and agreements, it is often beneficial to have him present at those meetings to be able to answer specific questions related to those.
Well, not having to do with Mr. Welch being there, but it seems to me most of these permits, I understand that we get we're either getting a report, recommendation, approved, not approved. Seems to me those discussions happen before we get to this stage of deciding what goes on the agenda or not. So that's my point, is about if you need two people to set the agenda. I'm just trying to be conservative on that basis. There you go through. Oh, one thing on your report, Mr. Sobiek, is it possible to speed up my time after the heading to say, you know, submit it to the board and then give the explanation? So I'm sorry, I'm a slow reader. I don't have to read through the whole paragraph. That would just be helpful to me. Maybe anybody else, I don't know. It just move it along. I don't have to read the rest of it. If it's already going to be in a report, I can go read the report. I do have a question on G on top of page 3. This has to do with a potential flood mitigation, and it makes a statement. So they're replacing, or to replace an 18 with a 42. And then it goes on to say, design in manner not materially increase discharges at the site boundary. And I'm having a hard time thinking how going from an 18 to a 42-inch pipe is not going to change the discharge unless we don't need a 42-inch pipe.
President Sigler, Manager Cook. I've had a couple of additional meetings with the applicant, and they've actually submitted a permit on this here this week. Within the 42-inch pipe, they are installing steel plates with orifices on them, so smaller holes, so that it restricts the flow to match very closely to what that 18-inch pipe does. They want to get this 42-inch pipe installed concurrently with the school district's project on the site so that they can take advantage of that one construction season during the summer.
Again, I don't know that that answers my question. And anytime somebody tells me you're putting plates in a pipe, you know, the hairs on the back of my neck go up and say, what's going to restrict it, plug it, et cetera. So enough on that. But my point is, it didn't seem consistent. And maybe in the future, if you wouldn't mind, or for us uneducated, if you could explain it a little bit further. Let's see. I've got on task order 29B, Middle Riley Creek. I thought we were done with that, but it says additional live plugs will be planted. Are we not done with everything other than making sure the plants are growing? Or
Those would be for if there are any replacements that need to happen this spring.
okay, well,
Yes, the project is substantially complete.
okay, it's a little misleading, or kind of raised the question.
It is.
But thanks. Okay, that explains it. I appreciate that. I'm trying to understand under task order 032 Cap B, Upper Riley Creek. Excuse me, about the middle of the paragraph. And it says a no rise requires hydraulic modeling to demonstrate floor elevations do not increase more than 0 feet, increase or decrease by more than 0.094 feet. I had a hard time understanding that. What does that mean?
Managers, I'll apologize. There's an extra word in there, the word increase. So it should say not increase by more than 0 feet or decrease by more than 0.094 feet.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That explained my confusion. And then let's see. On task order 43, ecosystem health plan, is there I read what we're doing, but do we have a projected time for having some type of a draft, a memo or report, et cetera, on this?
President Sigler, Manager Cook, in terms of the timeline, we are working together to have our first meeting with the technical advisory panel towards the middle of May. And then there will be 2 to 3 additional subsequent meetings with that panel. The actual report would not be until late this year.
So do we have a document that basically describes what this is, what we're intending to accomplish under this plan? Do we have some type of a framework document setting forth, here's the reasons, here's the goals, and here's what we're gonna do. Do we have anything like that?
President Ziegler, Manager Cook, the best information that we have is going to be part of the task order that was approved back in February, I believe.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
So did we get a motion and a second to accept the
Yes.
Pardon me,
engineer's report?
pardon me, Mr. President, I have one more comment. Would it be possible, Mr. Sobiak, if in the discussion, if you could try to, the best you can, to put the items in chronological order? It got a little confusing going through, and first we're talking end of the month, then we're talking about the first of the month. So I'd appreciate that. Make it a little easier reading. That's now I have said everything. Thank you, President Ziegler.
So I believe we did have a motion and a second at the beginning from Manager Patterson and Manager Crafton. So any other questions from any other managers on the engineer's report? Hearing none, can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager Duval,
Yes,
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Patterson,
Yes,
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
So the next thing on the agenda is the March regulatory program report. Manager Cook, I believe you pulled that from the consent agenda.
Yes, President Ziegler, I did, and I'm just pulling it up at this point. This actually jogged my memory and has some of the comments I have regarding the annual report. Am I not correct that we do have a database where we're tracking now permits and inspections, et cetera? Am I correct or incorrect?
President Ziegler, Manager Cook, that is correct.
Okay. So, is it possible to generate reports off of that database? Of various kinds, I assume, depending on how you write them. Is that correct?
Yep.
I appreciate the summary. I guess that was important, but two issues that I have, I didn't see is the there were two permitting issues on two additional ones on Lotus Lake. One was on the west side of Lotus Lake. I forget what the address is. That had a case of not getting a permit, having to do landscaping, et cetera. And that was supposed to be going through. I didn't see that on here, and that should be on here. Also, there was the matter of the after the fact permit application on the southeast side, again having to do with riprap. And I believe that Mr. Jeffrey stated at one time that had been maybe administratively approved. I'd like to see the documentation on that if we could, if I'm correct on that.
President Ziegler, Manager, that actually came to the board for approval. That would have been almost a year ago now. The riprap on the west side is 7636 South Shore Drive. They have received their notice of probable violation and have provided an after the fact permit, but not any not a complete application at this time. And then the 7300 Laredo was full tear down and rebuild. And that will be before you in May, one way or another. And it's looking more like as what do you want to do for enforcement? Because they still haven't provided materials for review.
Oh, so excuse me, I don't want to interrupt. So what you're saying is the 7300 Laredo, is that property on the west side, which was the tear down rebuild, and they put the retaining walls and did the shoreline work?
That
Okay,
is
great.
correct.
Yeah, I'm making a note on that one there. Would you mind sending me the information or a link on that one on the southeast side that was approved?
The riprap, after the fact riprap one?
Right, exactly, where it came in and
Yep.
was threatening. Okay, probably a file on that. That's all I have right now. Thanks. I'll have a couple of comments having to do with the permitting and violations when we get to the annual report. Thank you.
Okay, do we have a motion? I don't think we got a motion yet on this, accepting the regulatory report.
Also move.
I'll second.
So we
Go
have a
ahead.
motion and a
Seconded,
second.
Tom. Seconded.
Okay. Do we have any further questions or comments on the regulatory program report? Hearing none, can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager DeVal,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. The next item is approval of permit 2022-068. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, or if that's just an acronym. Do we have any motions on this? Well, I'll make a motion to approve the permit 2022-068.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Manager Cook, you pulled us off the consent agenda, so do you have questions?
Yes, I do, please. So really, sorry, the question is, it has to do with the language. We go to, sorry, page 10 of 11. And so first of all, similar to my comment on the engineer's report, I'm wondering if there's a way that we can have a simple one-liner at the beginning of each report saying, you know, for the reasons stated below, where, you know, engineers recommending, you know, approval of the permit with the recommendations and conditions, so that, I mean, I pretty much take what Mr. Sobiak says as being correct. And generally, I assume he doesn't even write one if he isn't recommending it, but I know some of them he doesn't. So that would be helpful if we know it's going to be recommended for approval. But to the point is on page 10, under recommendations, paragraph number 3. I take it, I'm not sure what you mean by receipt and recordation, a maintenance declaration for the operation. And here's where my question is. It seems to me, I think it would be preferable, at least from my perspective, that the permit is going to be subject to reaching a maintenance agreement, okay, or the maintenance agreement satisfactory to the district, and that maintenance agreement be recorded, you know, with the real estate, the registrar, or the register of deeds, you know, on that basis. So it's not clear what receipt and recordation is. I mean, is it actually recorded, or is it just receipt of a maintenance declaration acceptable, blah, 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 acceptable to the district? And then the second sentence says, and upon approval will be recorded.
President Ziegler, Manager Cook, the first sentence there is intended to say that they essentially need to provide proof that they did record the reviewed and approved declaration at the appropriate county. So receipt of proof of recordation.
Yeah, well, to me, that would be a little better, a little easier to understand. But the other part is that I think it's important to make clear that the maintenance agreement or whatever, this one I'm not sure has a maintenance agreement in it, but some of them have maintenance agreements. And I think I would prefer to see language that says, must submit a maintenance agreement, acceptable to the district. And this is not the example. I think the next one might be an example of that, where we have a maintenance agreement. So, and then the question is, do our rules specify the submission of or give the permittee the 45 days? Seems like a long time to submit the fees. And I would like to see it shortened. I would think that 30 days would be more than enough. This is not a deal breaker, but I think it's something to consider in looking at our rules and our permitting process. Why have it hang out there so long? Get them and get the money to us appropriate. So those were the comments. Be nice to know if the recommended approval was up front, and then, as I already mentioned, the language about the maintenance declaration recording, and then finally about the time given to make the deposit. That's it. Thank you.
President Ziegler, Manager Cook. Just to your last point about the timeline to submit the permit fee deposit, on page 8, underneath Rule L, permit fee deposit, we do include in here a statement deemed sufficient within 30 days of receiving notice.
Okay, so should we make that last part consistent? 45, should that be the 30 days instead? You can look at it. You don't have to answer me now, but it just seems to me going forward, just to make sure that we're consistent.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments on this permit, the 2022-068? Hearing none, we had a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Sorry, I was muted. Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is approve the permit 2022-077 Dunbar Court Development as presented. Do we have any motions on this item?
I move we accept permit 2022-077.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I believe that Manager Cook had questions on this one.
I do, and then I'll have a motion to amend that I failed to make on the prior one, but be that as it is. Let me go to my comments here. Let's see. So the reason I pulled this was basically to ask if we could get some semblance of standardization in the language that goes into the general requirements and the recommendations. And this might not be the best, example because it deals with, the drawings, et cetera. But I'm wondering if do you work off of templates that, if A applies, here's the language we use. If B applies, here's the language we use. And if you don't, I'd like to see you, consider doing that. So for purposes of, if it's all the same, it's going to be easier and faster, at least for me to review this. I had the same comment on page 11, item 3, as I had on the prior permit 2022-068 regarding that language. So that's my comment, but I would make a motion to amend. My motion to amend is to adopt the resolutions pertaining to 2022-077 set forth in the engineer's report for permit number 2022-077.
Do we accept that as a friendly amendment?
I go along with that. That's fine.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this permit, the 2022-077? Can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is to approve permit 2022-076. The culvert lining. We have a motion on this item.
I move we accept permit, or we approve permit 2022-076.
Second.
Okay, we have a
President
motion
Ziegler,
and a second.
President Ziegler, managers, it should be 2022-079, just typo in the agenda, so I apologize for that. 2022-079.
Okay, Manager Cook, you pulled this item, I believe.
Yes, I did. And if we go to page 5, and on item number 2, I recommend that you consider changing that language to read that the permit applicant, one second, sorry, must enter into a maintenance agreement and inspection plan with the RPBCWD, and then continue for the water bodies. Then I would recommend that and then I believe that you would strike the second sentence as unnecessary. I think that would simplify, or you could add once approved, once approved. No, I think it's unnecessary once we say must basically enter into a maintenance agreement. That's simple. You want me to repeat it?
Engineer Sobiak, I'm not sure why we're questioning the way you word things or whomever on your staff.
President Ziegler, Manager Cook, I have a question for clarification. The first sentence is intended to show that they need to provide us a draft of the maintenance agreement such that we can review it and go back and forth to get it in the right form. And then once it's approved by the district, they must enter into the agreement. That's the meaning for the second sentence. We tried to keep those two thoughts separate with separate sentences.
Sorry, let me get rid of this. Are the agreements, don't we have a template for the agreements? I
President
mean,
Ziegler,
I
Manager.
I just think it's, you know, redundant, but if that's the way you want to do it, you can do it that way. I think it's simpler to have the one sentence. Or you could say must provide and enter into an agreement self-inspection plan for the water body acceptable to the Bradley Purgatory Bluff Creek.
Manager Cook, did you have other questions on this?
Nope, that's it. That's it.
That's it. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this?
Mr. President, could you repeat the motion?
The motion was to approve permit number 2022-079. I don't think I need to read the rest of it.
Yeah, no. So I have a motion to amend.
Let us know what it is.
Okay. So I move that we adopt the proposed resolutions set forth in the report provided to the board, but change the permit number from 2022-076 to 2022-079.
Is that a friendly amendment? Or accepted as a friendly amendment?
So, Mr. President,
Manager Duval?
so looking at the amendment, it looks like it is 2022-079. This
It was
is,
just listed incorrectly on the minutes.
but the actual report is 2022-079. This is for the, what is it for?
The culvert lining project.
Yes, culvert rehabilitation. It is listed as the 2022-079 on the report itself.
Well,
President
Mr.
Ziegler.
Engineer Sobiak?
Just as a point of clarification with the confusion with the permit number, I discovered that earlier this morning that the permit number was incorrect in what was provided in the packet last week. I then asked Administrator Jeffrey and Staff Backham to make a replacement with the correct one prior to this board meeting. So that's why could be some confusion if you printed and looked at materials earlier in the week compared to what's out there today.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I would, well, I printed out what was in the packet. My recommendation is that if documents that go out in the packet are going to be changed or added to, there needs to be a specific notice provided to the managers and the public so that they know that something that was in the packet has been changed. And so I would hope that we would have that process going forward.
Okay, so I think what Manager Duval was pointing out is there's no need to accept a change in the original motion. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I would think it would be, but since I don't have the other motion in front of me, I can try to go pull it up, I guess, but it seems to me that my motion to amend, is still pertinent in that I am moving to adopt the resolution set forth in at least the draft that I had, but And I clarified that the permit number was 2022-079. So I think we can vote on my motion to amend.
Manager Crafton,
Yeah, I mean, the content of the permit is still all the same. So, and it's listed in the agenda as 79. I don't see the need to. I think
I
it'd be
think-
confusing, given what the agenda says at this point.
but I think we're still adding the language of the resolution to approve the, adopting the resolution rather than just approving it. So I think it's something we've been doing is having a resolution for everything. And this one was covered under the consent agenda resolution. But now that they're individual, there's I assume an individual resolution. Mr. Jeffrey, maybe you can explain that.
President Ziegler, contained within each permit report is a resolution in that motion, recommended motion, and it goes in be it resolved of that. So that resolution is contained within each report. My understanding is if we pass the resolution for the consent agenda, it's just approving all of the resolutions underlying that one agenda. Mr. Smith, is that correct?
So I believe we've been accepting these as a friendly amendment. If Manager Cook points out that we shouldn't just be saying approve the permit, we're adopting the resolution to approve the permit.
That is correct.
So we're not changing anything. We're just adopting the resolution that was written by staff. I can see Manager Crafton is still not.
I'm just waiting for the rest of you.
Okay, so do we want to vote on it just to keep it simple? The amendment to the motion?
So we're
Mr.
going to vote on the amendment to update the resolution, right?
Well, just the amendment to the motion to use the resolution that was already written for this item.
And Mr. President,
Instead of approving the permit, we're going to adopt the resolution.
yes, Mr. President, if I may.
Manager Cook?
You're correct. We're here to adopt the resolution, which tells the administrator that they can issue the permit basically once the conditions for approval have been resolved. So, and it also states that the permit is approved subject to conditions and stipulations. So otherwise, just approving the permit might not necessarily incorporate the conditions and stipulations.
So any questions
That's
on
what I
that?
said.
Okay. So that's at most, it's a friendly amendment. Okay, I don't recall, was it Manager Pedersen that made this motion? And do you accept it as a friendly amendment?
It's fine.
Okay, can we have a roll call vote then, please, on adopting the resolution for the approval of 2022-079?
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager DeVell,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes,
Manager Pedersen,
Yes,
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is approval of permit 2023-005. Is that correct, Mr. Jaffrey?
That is correct, President Ziegler.
I move we approve permit 2023-005.
Second.
Okay, with that second, we're approving the resolution.
Resolution.
Yeah, okay. Manager Cook, I believe you pulled this. Do you have other questions?
I have one question. The reason I pulled it was I was trying to an item 4 on page 8 refers to the programmatic maintenance agreement covering city projects. I don't recall having seen that. I wasn't aware that we had some type of generic maintenance agreement having to do with these projects. And if so, what does it entail?
President Ziegler, Manager Cook, yeah, we entered into a programmatic agreement with the city of Eden Prairie, 2016. I believe.
And what does that generally provide? How do you have an agreement? I mean, how does the agreement cover maintenance on? I mean, does it cover a wide variety of projects, or?
It provides, so with each subsequent application, they still need to, if they have a proprietary device, they would have to add that as their maintenance of it. They have to provide a GIS database of these areas that they're maintaining, and then they have to do annual reporting to us of their maintenance activities.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Are there any other questions on this resolution to adopt or to approve permit 23 I'm sorry, I think I jumped ahead. 20-23-005. Excuse me, getting a little hoarse here. Can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
So I believe the next one that was pulled was to adopt resolution 23-025, accepting the Personnel Committee's recommendation to approve the administrator work plan as amended by the committee.
Mr. President.
Can we get a motion and a second first, and then?
Yeah, Mr. President. Can I make
Manager Cook?
a motion? Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate that. I move that we lay over consideration of resolution 23-025 until the next meeting, given that my understanding this is a plan that's going to be applied, and quite frankly, given the fact that we got this late, it was the Easter weekend. I have not had sufficient time to review it and comment on it, so that's why I moved to lay it over to the next month.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Hearing no second, the motion fails for lack of a second.
Mr. President, I'd like to move that we adopt resolution 23-025, which is accepting the Personnel Committee's recommendation to approve the administrator work plan as amended by the Personnel Committee.
Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion?
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
again, I'll say I haven't had sufficient time to review this. There's no immediacy for adopting or approving this. Am I to take it that the Personnel Committee just wants to ram this through, not give other people the time to consider this plan and its attributes? It's fairly detailed. You take some time to review this, and it's my view inappropriate to consider and approve this work plan given the short notice and lack of time to properly review this work plan.
Any other comments? Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Devon,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
No.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Okay, I believe the adopt resolution 23-034 authorizing distribution of the annual report is next on the agenda. Do we have a motion in this for this item?
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I move that we lay this over until our next meeting. The reason for doing so is I've requested to see comments made by the other managers. I have not received those. So until I've seen those comments, it's not appropriate to pass on, this annual report other than to reiterate my comments that I made. So that's my motion to lay over.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Hearing no second, the motion fails for lack of a second.
Mr. President, I'd like to move that we adopt resolution 23-034, authorizing the distribution of the 2022 annual report. I believe there is a time deadline on this, and I think we need to move forward.
Second for that reason too.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. President.
Manager Cook?
So I have a question for the other managers. Have they read my comments that I believe were forwarded by Mr. Jeffrey? Hearing none, I assume they have not. Secondly, the annual report does not comply with the Bowser rules and regulations. It does not include an adequate, at a minimum, does not include an adequate discussion of permit violations. We all know that there's multitudes of them. They're not adequately discussed or described, and the report is required under the rules and the statute on which those rules are based. I previously stated also that it is inappropriate to include the legend regarding or alleging that lands were stolen from Native Americans. Native Americans have all the access they're entitled to the courts. I am not aware of any case that they have brought to reacquire or obtain any rights in the lands pursuant to any treaty. As I'm sure everybody's aware, the Mille Lacs Band has had litigation under treaties and has prevailed in those. I think it's Choctaw, don't quote me, tribes in Oklahoma have tried their case and they won, and basically, as I understand it, the sum and substance of that decision was that they own half of Oklahoma. To my knowledge, to date, they have not decided what they want to do with those rights on that basis. So I believe it's inappropriate for us to interject, political issues that do not involve the watershed district. Secondly, of all the, or third, I guess, of all the reports that I reviewed, I believe my number is correct. Only 2 of them had any kind of a comment from an administrator. I don't believe it's appropriate to have the administrator be the one commenting on the annual report. If anyone, I believe it should be the president or maybe a joint statement. But all you have to do is go, if you took the time to review the other reports that were provided by Mr. Jeffrey, you would, I believe you will concur with my statement as to the number. The email that I received from Mr. Jeffrey stated that he received comments and that staff decided whether or not the proposed comments or changes was appropriate. I was not aware of the fact that staff was authorized or had the authority or rights to determine what went into or did not go into the annual report. I believe that kind of a statement is a statement outside the scope of the authority of the staff. It is up to the board of managers to decide what goes in and what does not go into the annual report. So we should reconsider my motion to lay over, given the fact that none of the managers read my comments, nor have I, after asking, nor have I received the comments by the other managers, which is a breach of the Minnesota Data Practices Act, by the way. And for anybody to make decisions without having appropriate information, I believe would be malfeasance, if not, and misfeasance under the statutes pertaining to the ability to hold a position as a manager. So I'll move to amend the motion and to lay over the approval of the annual report until such time as I have received all the other managers' comments.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Hearing no second, the motion fails for lack of a second. So the motion on the table is adopt resolution 23-034, authorizing distribution of the 2022 annual report. Can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Andrew Crafton,
Yes,
Andrew Duval,
Yes.
Andrew Cook,
No.
Andrew Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Okay, that brings us to the action items. The first one is accepting the February treasurer's report.
I'll move acceptance of the treasurer's report,
All second.
February.
We have a motion and a second. Do we
Mr.
have any
President?
questions or comments?
Mr. President, point of order.
Manager Cook?
Could I ask that we enforce the rule that before speaking, people ask for the floor?
President Ziegler, can I move acceptance of the treasurer's report?
Yes, you may.
Consider it done.
Okay. I believe someone seconded it. I think
That
it
was me.
Manager. Yes, okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the treasurer's report?
Yes, Mr. President.
Manager Cook?
So I would like to know what the amount of $30,256 payable to Carver County was for.
President Ziegler.
Was that AIS? Oh, sorry,
That's
go ahead.
correct. That was
Excuse me.
inspection.
Again, point of order. Could we please have people ask for the floor?
Administrator Jeffrey, can you explain this?
President Ziegler, that is our payment to Carver County for the NS inspections.
Thank you. If I can continue, Mr. Ziegler, President
Yes.
Ziegler. So I've asked, I believe I've asked for the bar engineering invoice as well as the Smith Partner invoice. I don't recall if I received either one of those. But I'll renew my request for those, at least those that I have not received. I have a follow-up question to the 30,000. Is there a reason why we, at the bottom, we go and designate 2022 invoices? My understanding, I'm not sure, are we reporting the payment? Are we reporting the payment for 2022 or reporting the payment in 2023? How are we accounting for that?
President Ziegler.
Manager Crafton.
So those are held out aside because of the audit and making sure that since it's done on an accrual basis, that things that were done in 22 are recognized then. So they were already paid. So, but evidently they didn't come through until February.
Mr. President, may I continue?
Manager Cook.
Well, I'm not sure I understand Manager Crafton's, explanation. If we got the invoices, I don't understand why we're just paying them now, but if we didn't get the invoices, I think there's a question of when is the proper accrual that should be taken up with the auditors. Next question has to do on page 2 of 4 and why we're carrying a negative balance in US Bank.
President Ziegler,
Administrator Jeffrey.
managers, it reflects the transfer funds out of US Bank to 4M funds. They get pulled back out of 4M funds to cover that account. My assumption, but I don't know for sure, is that that payment was made and the withdrawal from the 4M funds is not reflected in that at the time.
So,
US Bank should always carry a zero balance, but at the end of the day.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook.
I'd like to ask the Audit and Finance or the Accounting and Finance Committee to look into that. There shouldn't be a reason for carrying a negative balance if it's set up right. It's possible, but it shouldn't. So I'm on unearned income. Can have explanation for that amount?
To the net income,
Unearned income. Unearned revenue. My apology.
I'm sorry, what are you asking?
What is that? What constitutes the unearned revenue? What is that made up of? What are the inputs?
Unearned revenue are monies that we have gotten or are getting that have not been spent yet. So grant distributions that have not been spent, to that nature.
Okay, thank you. If I can continue, please.
Manager Cook.
So I go down on page 3 of 4, and under Riley Creek, we have Middle Riley Creek. And it has, we have a budget item of $27,000. We've paid that. What is that when we paid 23,000 of that? What is that for again? I thought we were substantially complete.
President Ziegler, we are substantially complete. There is additional work that was going on with the restoration, payment of retainage and subs. That was, I believe that was pay application 7 on the last agenda. Engineer Sobiak, I'm looking at you, but that's the problem. Zoom, I can't. So that was on the last pay application at the last meeting.
And then it's the same question having to do with St. Hubert's. We have a $50,000 budget, and I thought we were substantially complete.
We are substantially complete. That 50,000 reflects the payment yet to be made by St. Hubert to us.
Have they made their payment for last year? Or are they only due
It's-
this year?
President Ziegler, Manager Cook, is one lump sum payment at the end of the project closeout. So they will be invoiced this year for payment.
I was under the impression that they were paying us so much a year for so many years, but maybe I'm wrong. Perhaps, okay. Then if you go to page 404, what is Canva? The last item.
And Steph, I'm looking at you.
Sure. Managers, Canva is a sort of online PowerPoint alternative that staff Mahan uses a lot in her presentations for education and outreach. It's an annual subscription.
So, Mr. President, if I can continue.
Manager Cook?
So that being said, I raised this issue with Administrator Jeffrey, in reviewing the annual report, unless I had to convert it to a Word document, but apparently there's software out there. It's pretty cheap. I think it's $30 a person that they can have that allows for basically commenting on, amending, marking up the type of document that was provided. And I'd like to see us acquire that software if we're going to continue to use the software in which the annual report was created, so that we can make more efficient comments and suggested changes to that software. It seems like it's certainly cheap enough and would save people's time to do that. That are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second on the February treasurer's report. Any further questions by any managers? Hearing none, can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager DeVal,
Yes, yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is to approve the resolution 23-027 to approve paying of the bills. Do we have any motions on this item?
I'll move payment of the bill, please.
All second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions or comments by any of the managers? Hearing no questions or comments, can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager DeVal,
Yes,
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay. For some reason, this resolution looks like it has the same number. But this is to authorize the administrator to enter into an agreement with Smith Partners to provide legal services. Is that the correct resolution number?
President Ziegler. The one to pay the bills should have been 26.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook,
I move that we lay over this item, given the fact it's not effective until next year, at least as I read it. Lay this over I have some changes that I would like to pass by legal counsel regarding the agreement.
Is there any timing on this other than Manager Cook pointed out that it doesn't take effect until next year? Is that correct?
Mr. President, I believe we're in 2023, so it
Yes.
would take effect immediately.
Well, then in that case, I'm going to move that we lay this over because it has issues and I want to address them with legal counsel. In addition, another reason to lay it over is that based on the information provided to me, the solicitation of proposals was totally inadequate, inadequately distributed to law firms based on the information that I have, such to the point that it would appear that it was done in a manner where there would be no competition for to provide legal services. So again, I'll renew the motion to lay it over until we have done a proper solicitation of proposals.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Hearing no second, the motion fails for lack of a second.
Mr. President, I move we adopt resolution 23-027. That's the authorizing the administrator to enter into the
second.
agreement with Smith Partners.
So the motion was made by Manager Pedersen and seconded by Manager Crafton. Do we have comments or discussion?
Yes, Mr. President.
Manager Cook?
Well, number one, I repeat my request that we abide by Robert's Rules of Order and seek the floor before speaking. That applies to motions and to seconds. Secondly, I repeat the reasons why this should not be passed. One, there are issues with the agreement. And two, there was inadequate solicitation of proposals regarding filling this position, at least based upon the information that was provided or not, and or lack thereof provided by the administrator.
Any further discussion on this item? Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
No.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is to adopt resolution 23-028, authorizing the administrator to enter an agreement with Bar Engineering to act as district engineer and provide engineering services to the district until 12/31/2025. Do we
Mr.
have any-
President, may I move that we adopt resolution 23-028?
You may. Do we have any seconds?
Second.
Mr. President,
Okay, Manager Crafton,
seeking your permission, I would like to second.
okay, sounds good. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions, comments on this item?
Yes, Mr. President.
Manager Cook?
There was no agreement attached to the motion. So I don't know what we're approving.
So that there wasn't a resolution,
What,
23-09 or 029. It's
There was
listed
a
on
re-
the agenda. I don't know
there
if it
was a
was
res,
or not.
excuse me, I'm sorry, Mr. President, if I can continue. There was a resolution, but the copy that I have does not have any agreement attached.
Yes,
It is on,
President Ziegler,
Manager Crafton,
the one I have has got 35 pages attached to it.
Mine too.
So. And this is resolution 28, correct?
Mhm.
right.
23-028,
for bar engineering.
Mhm.
Yes.
yes.
But Mr. President,
Manager Cook,
mine doesn't, and I took it off the website. So unless something was added afterwards. I'm not in a, and, you know, can't have things being added at any ad hoc anytime we have a board packet. We're going to be changing board packets. We need to notify anybody. And in fact, I have a specific request to be notified pursuant to statute. I didn't receive any update, wasn't attached. So therefore, and since this I understand is not effective, it ends at the end of 2025, if I heard correctly. They're 2-year agreements. It wouldn't be applicable, would it, to this year? Therefore, is there any urgency in doing that?
President Ziegler,
Administrator Jaffrey,
managers, it would go into effect on August 1st of 2023, so it does not have the same urgency as the Smith Partners agreement.
So, Mr. President,
Manager Cook,
I move that we lay this item over till the next meeting so that I have an opportunity to review the agreement.
we have a motion. Do we have a second? Hearing no second, the motion fails for lack of a second. So we have a motion and a second on adopting resolution 23-028. Do any managers have further comments before we vote?
Yes, Mr. President.
Manager Cook?
Well, I object to covering this item, so I'm going to ask all the managers, have you read all 35 pages of the agreement?
President Ziegler, I did.
Okay,
President
so
Ziegler, I did not read all the pages, and the reason is I know that Mr. Smith has looked through the pages, and that's what we have him hired to do. I trust our legal counsel.
well, if I may continue, Mr. President.
Manager Cook?
Well, in my view, that's an inadequate response for us dealing with this. I don't know why I wasn't provided with a copy of the agreement attached to my copy of the resolution, and I was not given any notice that it was. And all due respect, you know, if anybody is in a position to comment on the contracts, perhaps it's, you know, myself, and I don't, you know, trust but verify, as Ronald Reagan said. So we shouldn't be addressing this resolution at this time specifically, since we have, there is no urgency at this point to adopt this.
Okay, any other comments? Can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager DeVell,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
No,
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is to adopt resolution 23029, authorizing the administrator to enter into an agreement with PLM and Midwest Aquacare to provide aquatic vegetation management. Do we have any
President Ziegler?
motions? Manager Crafton?
Yes, I would like to move resolution number 23-029, authorizing execution of the contract with PLM and MWAC for 23 lake vegetation management.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have further discussion on this item? No discussion. Can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
No.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is to adopt resolution 23030, authorizing administrator to enter into cost share agreement with the Preserve Association for Habitat Restoration Project. Do we have any motions on this item?
Mr. President,
Manager Pedersen?
I would like to move the resolution, adopting the resolution 23-030.
Manager or President Ziegler,
Manager Crafton?
I'd like to second, please.
Okay. We have a motion and we have a second. Do we have any discussion on authorizing the resolution for the cost share agreement with the Preserve Association?
Yes, Mr. President.
Manager Cook?
Well, so first of all, I'm going, well, so first of all, this is a lot of money to be spent on basically association that has over 1,700 units. I don't think that this is, I think we can accomplish the same thing by spending a lot less money and putting in prairie grass instead of all of the flowers and plants. And I'm certainly not in favor of it until we get a report on the success of our other grants where we've had items planted. I'm concerned that there's a lack of ability to adequately maintain the plants, et cetera. And even if we did this, I didn't see any place where we're going to have a sign. If we do this, approve this, we should be having a sign specifically denoting our contribution to this project and a significant one. And I also note that there's not only 1,700 units here, but I mean, they've got swimming pools and tennis courts, et cetera. I think there are places where we can better spend our money than on this project. And therefore, I think we should not approve this project as it's been proposed, but to have it, cut back.
Any other?
Excuse me.
Sorry, you're not done?
I'm sorry. If I might, one last comment. I mentioned this. It amounts to with 1,700 units, $11.60 according to my calculation per unit. I'm not sure why they aren't contributing more and to this project. That's like I said, I think there's better ways to spend our money than doing somebody else's landscaping for them.
On this particular item, Administrator Jeffrey, I noticed there was quite a bit of discussion on diversity, equity, and inclusion, I believe. And I guess I was surprised that Preserve has kind of a reputation as a high-end, or at least in my mind, had its reputation as kind of a high-end area, place to live. Can anybody explain what that stuff meant?
President Ziegler, managers, so the Metropolitan Council numbers have put out GIS shape files based upon the average income, home costs, and other factors in an area. Well, this doesn't rise to top level. It is an at-risk area, and there are marginalized communities here that aren't represented in this area. So I think we still think of the preserve in terms of what it was in 1985 to 1995. It was really the place, but it is not that anymore. The demographics have changed significantly.
So this is a place that we should be spending some money to make sure we get adequate representation with the diversity, equity, and inclusion that we preach.
But President Ziegler, I would agree with that statement.
Oh, Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I don't recall seeing anything that gave us any demographics pertaining to this association. And, without, some demographics, how do we know that this actually would qualify or does qualify? And whether or not this is a place to spend money. And, again, I'm also concerned that this project's going to end up like the Lake Susan, and if there's no provision for putting water in these plants when it's early, we have another dry year. I don't know if there was no indication that's included or that's what's going to happen. Maintenance plan, we don't have a maintenance plan presented to us. I would say that this needs some rethinking and some more definition to it. And I would think that this is a candidate for some prairie grass as opposed to a lot more native plants, which I question their ability to maybe take root and survive. And I just don't have enough. I mean, it's what, a 3-year maintenance plan? Is that what I understand? Well, 3 years is. How long are we going to make them maintain it? Forever? Is that part of the deal?
There is a sunset on it, I believe it's 20 years.
And so, but we have no recourse really if they don't maintain it.
That is correct. Other than the agreement that we have saying they will, we could ask to recoup the funding that we put into it.
Is Mr. Smith or the agreement, is that explicit? I mean, do we need something more meat on the bones protecting ourselves with the association? And right now, it's the agreement basically with the agreement provided was with what's the company that's going to do the work?
National Trust.
Yeah. So don't we need to have an agreement or, with the association acknowledging all the requirements, et cetera, and, providing for adequate, watering, et cetera, maintenance under the agreement. So I think that we shouldn't approve this without, requiring a maintenance agreement and specifically including the right to recoup our money if they fail to maintain the project as required. So I know it's a grant, but it's no different to me than any other contract, except for having the contract with the right parties, set forth the requirements including, whatever rights we may want to, recoup our money if they fail to, do the maintenance. So I wouldn't approve this, without having the agreement, come back to us and an acknowledgement of all the restrictions and the requirements by somebody at by the people at the association. And I don't even know if the association is a legal entity that has any assets. So I take that as a no, Mr. Jeffrey.
Oh, they have legal access. Staff forms is coming in. That's what I was referring to it. They are a legal entity that can enter into this agreement, yes.
President Ziegler?
Yes.
We do have a drafted grant agreement that was my mistake. I did not include it with the packet, but we do have the standard grant agreement, including the maintenance agreement. And I do have a 3 years professional maintenance from the Natural Shore to do the first 3 years of maintenance for this project. So we do have that, but it was my mistake. I should have included the draft agreement with this in this board pack, and I did not.
Thank you.
President Ziegler?
Manager Pedersen.
Yes, in my work, my professional level of work, I worked with Minnehaha Creek Watershed District with Bass Lake, with Lower Min, a number of them, and even having a 3-year maintenance agreement it's pretty good. A lot of times you're not even getting that much on a cost share. And the reason why you can't guarantee that they're going to maintain it for 20 years is, unfortunately, the natural world is not like rolling up to McDonald's and ordering hamburgers from the takeout menu. Things change all the time in nature, and especially with climate change, lots of these plantings end up significantly different in a period of 5 to 10 years. If we had Fred Brzezmalski here from BAR, he could tell you he's done mass plantings for the city of Minneapolis, and in 5 years period of time, what he planted and what's there is much different. So I think this agreement is a good agreement. I think it's put together well. I looked at the plant materials that's in it. I think it's a good project. I would stand behind it. And this is kind of what I do for a lot of my business. So I think this is a good project, and I'm for this.
President Ziegler?
Manager Crafton.
Yeah, I concur with that. Looking at the list, and Natural Shores does an outstanding job. They're top of the line. They know what they're doing. The plant looks really good. The whole point of what we're trying to do with the ecosystems is putting in ecosystems, and that's what this project will do. And I think Liz has done a really great job in trying to set higher bar for getting a longer frame of really good ecosystem in place through our cost share program. So kudos to Liz.
Well, Mr. President.
Manager Cook.
Well, based on what I hear about, these things changing as much as they do, I question why we should be investing so much money into such a short, lived proposition. And I think, the old adage, you keep it simple, is applicable here. Basically, the more I heard, the more concerned I was about doing these kinds of projects. And especially after what I saw happen at, Lake Susan, on that basis. So, the agreement, it would seem to me it has to have, is there watering available? Are they going to water it? There was no watering on Lake Susan. I assume we had some type of maintenance agreement there. Maybe we didn't. But I think this whole thing needs to be looked at to make sure that we're being explicit enough in the requirements so that our spending this money. Sorry. My alarm telling me to go to bed. I have my doubts about these kinds of grants. We end up doing people's landscaping for them, putting in most of the money for something that's not going to last. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
No.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Okay, I believe the next thing that we have on the agenda was we were going to talk about the COVID prep. I think that we're going to go back to in-person meetings at the very latest, the first meeting in May. And I guess I'd like to hear from our lawyer if we, do we need to do it? I heard on that news today that President Biden has basically signed the paperwork and that the emergency is officially, the pandemic is officially over, but it didn't give me details as to whether, it took effect immediately or not. So I'm not sure, if we take our workshop, if we need to be in the office for that. Is Mr. Smith, if there's anything you can help me with, that'd be great.
Mr. President, managers, while, the federal government's, declarations by the president about the pandemic may be informative, you're certainly not bound by kind of a national assessment of pandemic conditions. If you as a local watershed district, as your own unit of government, have under the open meeting law, a basis for being concerned about the pandemic, you can continue to conduct remote meetings. I would say that most local units of government now are pretty much all that I'm aware of are meeting in person. I will also tell you that I had COVID 2 weeks ago, the first time. But it's really the board's assessment of local conditions and whether you think there's a basis continue to meet remotely or not.
So if it's up to just me, I think that, I agree with most organizations that we really don't have grounds for violating our open meeting laws. I say that as I have a cold right now, but we certainly can have filter systems and separation. And, if we were having an in-person meeting, perhaps I wouldn't be attending. But yeah, I think May 1st, any meetings after that need to be in-person meetings.
So, Mr. President,
Manager Duval.
so if I can ask for Mr. Jeffrey, have we gotten any more information on what we were talking about at one point a ways back about hybrid meetings and implementing that? Because it seems like that could still be the best of all worlds going forward. I think we've seen some of the benefits of the virtual, but there's also benefit of the in-person. And if somebody's traveling or if they're sick but they're not sick enough. Anyway, just a quick comment if we've done any further investigation and where that stands.
President Ziegler, Manager Bell, I have not received quotes for going with the full AV system. I have looked into other products that might allow us to do that. We could be anywhere from the 3,500 if that OWL system works. up to 50,000 if we go with what was done at 9 Mile Creek. I guess I might also ask Council Smith about this one thing. It'd be very easy to broadcast or live stream our meetings so that the public could watch. That's no problem at all. It's if we want to have managers at other places interacting, and there I think we have other issues beyond the technology beyond that. And I guess I would defer to Mr. Smith on that.
Mr. President.
Yes.
I would comment that some local units are, having been exposed to the remote meeting model are, looking at situations where a manager is out of town or otherwise would, has reasons that would like to participate remotely. The open meeting law does provide for that, but the requirements are that you need to have at least one board member present at your meeting location. You need to be sure that all board members can see and hear each other. And any members that are not meeting in your public meeting location need to be at a place that is noticed and open to the public, which may mean, it's not your home, but it may mean a publicly accessible place like a library, a hotel lobby, a coffee shop, but it needs to be a publicly accessible place, and the meeting notice needs to indicate the address of where that member will be located.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook.
question for Mr. Smith. Was there a exception though for certain number of meetings to be done remotely upon a doctor's recommendation?
Yes, and also military service, but they're pretty strict requirements. I can pull them up.
Well, I'm sorry. You go ahead if you have something else to add, but then I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Well, speak for myself. I mean, I have diabetes. As far as I know, I've never had COVID yet. I have no intention of getting it on that basis, because as all you know, my disease is one of the leading comorbidities, and for having that. And I try not to be swayed by the political discussion. If you actually go to the CDC, the most recent discussion is the concern about the latest variant that is slowly starting to take off, and the concern is whether or not that variant is going to become the dominant variant, and whether or not and the extent to which the current vaccines will provide protection against this new variant. So I believe, from a scientific point of view, having read the CDC comments, etc., I would not let the politics rule the day. I think we need to let the science, make the decision. And I think if we go to the CDC, that we would have, adequate basis for continuing to hold these meetings remotely, at least until we see what happens with this latest variant, which apparently is pretty virulent and can make one sick, although hopefully being vaccinated would minimize that. So I have no problem with, on that basis and based upon what the CDC said, I have no problem with continuing, remote meetings. And then my follow-up to that is the ventilation system at our meeting place, is that what is it, HEPA compliant or whatever it is? And if not, are we going to make it so? And if so, when? Because that's one of the big issues, is the circulation of any virus, and you basically don't want your HVAC system to be spreading it. And there are systems out there with electronic air purifiers that at least can help reduce the amount of the viral load in the air. And these small units really, as I've read, are not a solution because unfortunately they move more air than they fix or treat, and are not a solution, at least not for a large gathering on that basis. So I'm in favor of continuing it until CDC says there isn't a problem.
Okay, so we've got this in the action item in case we need to take a vote. I guess I'd like to hear from all the managers what their feeling is. It seems like it seems to me like we're violating the open meeting law if we don't follow, as we're saying, the political, they're the ones that made the rule for the open meeting law, and was voted on and approved by our legislators, not by the CAC. I'm sorry, not by the Center for Disease Control. So anyway.
Excuse me, Mr. President, I just want to add a flavor to that.
Okay.
My understanding is, and I'll let Mr. Smith comment on that, but I believe the statute, is pretty clear that, it's the decision either by you as president and or the legal counsel that makes the determination. And once you make a determination that there's a risk, then it's a different game. If you decide there is no risk, then you go through, you can only do the remote meetings. I think there's exceptions for so many meetings not being around. Maybe Mr. Smith can address that. But my initial belief is that there's a on-off switch. Either you believe there's a risk from a pandemic and you can say remote meetings, or if you don't believe there's a risk, then you fall under the rest of the open meeting requirements. And we'll let Mr. Smith comment.
Mr. President.
Mr. Smith.
So first on the standard for having remote meetings in pandemic conditions, and then I also wanted to refer to the other question Manager Cook had about a doctor's letter. So the pandemic provision of the open meeting law says that the presiding officer, chief legal officer, or chief administrative officer for the governing body can, if they determine that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent because of a health pandemic or an emergency that's been declared under state emergency law. So if board president or administrator or legal officer believes that pandemic conditions still exist that make meeting in person not practical or prudent, then you would make those findings in the declaration, and that's the basis for having these remote meetings. So what that means is the board can continue to assess what the pandemic conditions look like and what is practical or prudent in terms of having an in-person meeting. As far as when we're not in a pandemic situation, then the other provisions of the open meeting law allow remote participation in a non-public setting, meeting from your home or wherever that's not accessible. If you can do that for 3 times, if either you are on active military duty service, or there is a pandemic health emergency that's been declared, and you have a letter from a medical professional that says that I will just read the specific language. The member has been advised by a healthcare professional against being in a public place for personal or family medical reasons. This clause only applies when a state of emergency has been declared under section 1231 and expires 60 days after the removal of the state of emergency. And I believe that's where Governor Walz has lifted the state of emergency some time ago. So I don't believe that that provision would still be available as a basis.
Mr. President,
Manager Duval.
just a couple more comments again. I think most businesses, large and small, have developed all kinds of experience between doing business virtually versus in person. And I think a lot of companies have decided that there's merit in having the hybrid situations. And the hybrid situation, I think, allows for situations where somebody can participate remotely. It seems to me that of all the things we consider from a cost value proposition, that this would be something that would be interesting for us to do. And if there's some low rung technology that Mr. Jeffrey mentioned at the beginning that didn't cost the $50,000, but something less than that, it almost seems like we should try and do something like that. So I guess there's just a general comment on the state of the technology and for all the things bad with COVID, I think it did outline some benefits for doing what we're doing, regardless of the health issue. And the second thing I would mention in dealing with the Audit and Finance Committee meeting, for me, it's really difficult to be talking with a half a dozen different people, our accountants and monthly auditors, as well as the staff, to be doing this on a Zoom call. Some of the issues, just from my perspective, it seems like it requires people sitting across a table and drawing things out, putting it up on a whiteboard. So we're from my perspective, we're imposing a really straitjacket on how we actually can solve and resolve kind of our operational aspects. And so in that regard, I also think that that would be a great benefit for the watershed to be able to meet in person. And there again, it's not the same as necessarily a monthly meeting. We're not going to have a big group sitting in on the governance committee meeting or the audit and finance committee meeting. So it seems to me if we could do that or figure out how to work that in, that would be a really key feature to show as a benefit. And if one or more of us is unable to or unwilling to meet in public, but we had the ability to stay connected, it seems like that makes a lot of sense. And I'm just recovering from bronchitis, and I have diabetes also, and I share some of the same issues and concerns that Manager Koch has expressed. But I still go to Costco now, and sometimes I wear a mask and sometimes not. But I'm not sure that I want to sit in a small room and having just general public come in and sit for 2 hours in front of my face. So anyway, kind of a long-winded answer, but I think there's a couple of good points to figure out if we can tiptoe into this, some kind of a hybrid situation.
Well, Mr.
Mr.
President,
Smith, I see Mr. Smith's hand up.
If I might, there is one other, I would say, somewhat creative approach to trying to address this situation where you have some board members who have elevated health concerns and are affected by the pandemic differently than others. And in one other client setting, we drafted a resolution, a declaration about the pandemic that made it clear that for some members of the body, there was a heightened level of concern about exposure to the pandemic. And while others were comfortable meeting in person, it was not practical prudent for all members to meet in person. And given the existence of the pandemic generally, there was a basis to under the pandemic provision to allow some members to participate remotely. And honestly, I would just say it's kind of on the edges of what I think the State Department administration might be comfortable with, but we've seen a legal basis for it and it's been used very few times. But that's one other approach, just listening to this discussion, that I can think of.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook,
well, I for one would say I would want to know the condition of the HVAC system before I want to be in a room with people, and but go further than that. You know, no offense, but I have no interest in being within 3 feet of anybody, you know, under these conditions. I mean, and totally no offense then, but hey, if you go back to the original work, it was 6 feet, and that hasn't changed. In fact, the data shows that it's, you know, it's further than that. You know, let's put it this way. I think we go with the scientists. I go to the CAC. What Mr. Smith has suggested, you know, is plausible, but I guess I would hang it under the rubric that, hey, we're given the exception. Generally speaking, a reduced exception, you know, should work. I'm sure that's the theory, you know, that the other entities have applied. Generally, if you have a big exception, you can take less than the full exception as a principle. But I want to know what the state is. How are we going to arrange things? And I'm serious. I don't want to be within 3 feet of anybody. I know that, you know, Carver County, at least several months ago, when I was there, I mean, they had, I think, roughly 6 feet between everybody, and they only allowed a certain number of people, you know, in the room, for those reasons. But then the final comment is, I think we should always continue to do Zoom meetings, so as many of the public who want to see what's happening can see what's happening, and I think we should continue to record our meetings.
okay, so I guess I'm still at the point where the pandemic, the President of the United States and the Governor of Minnesota have said the pandemic emergency is over. But if Mr. Smith has a way that we can do hybrid meetings, and you know, obviously I'm very sensitive to people with health conditions that put them at higher risk. You know, I don't really agree with some of the open meeting law stuff, but it is the law, and you know, I want to follow the law. But if there's a good way to make it hybrid, so that you know, managers that have high risk don't have to, you know, sit close by somebody that's not as high a risk that might be sick and doesn't know. So I guess maybe the motion would be to approve to have Mr. Smith look into some of the details, and to have Administrator Jeffrey look into, you know, how we could do it on Zoom, you know, with many of the managers, or, you know, at least some of the managers in the office.
Well, Mr. President,
Manager Cook.
I would second that motion with addition, if you might, that Administrator Jeffrey look into the condition of our HVAC and what, if any, cost there would be to basically make it either HEPA compliant, or forget, there's a word for it or term for it. All hospitals, and I think most businesses have done that. In fact, I think that's an OSHA requirement. So we should be looking into the OSHA requirements, you know, regarding that. So if you take that as a friendly amendment to your motions.
I do take it as a friendly amendment. Do we have a second?
Yep, I second that.
Do we have any questions or comments from anyone? Okay, and I guess one aside is obviously, board members are required under the open meeting law, but staff could participate remotely. Mr. Jeffrey, you have a,
Yeah, I would like President Ziegler, one clarification on the technology aspect. Because there is such a wide range, what do you want it to be able to do? Do you want it to be set up so that certain managers can be remote as need be, and public can interact as need be, or do you want it to be really just a live stream of the meeting so people can watch it and know what's going on? So I just need clarification on what you want to, what you want me to find out.
so this is going to be a little more complicated, I'm afraid, but I believe with the general public, they need to be able to communicate for the time when they're allowed, right? But for the managers, they need to be able to see one another and talk at any time during the meeting.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
so yeah, let's making a motion to have Mr. Jeffrey come back with maybe a specific memorandum saying, here's A, B, C, and D, and here's what the capabilities of each and who can participate and how. I need that. I don't have the ability to have that and bring it to us. And so that's my motion.
So is that, I would take that as a friendly amendment to my motion. We just
Yes,
include
that's
that.
fine. That's
Okay.
fine. Add that.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
So what are we voting on?
So we're voting on approving staff and legal to do some research. Legal would do research on the managers not all being present due to higher risk for some managers than others. And Administrator Jeffrey would be looking at the HVAC system and what that's capable of and how much it would cost to bring it up to like HEPA standards. And then also looking at the hybrid meeting options that we might have where some managers, if they were at higher risk, could attend the meeting remotely. So some hybrid model that would work for managers. And also hybrid that would work for people who wanted to watch the meeting but not necessarily participate. So the general public. Did I miss anything?
That's it.
Okay. So are we ready for a roll call vote then? I would say yes. Please roll call vote, Mr. Smith.
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
So we'd like to get this back to us as quick as possible because obviously, if we're gonna be back face to face in May, if we have a way around that, that would be good, and we need to have it quickly.
I will do my best. Having it for the May meeting, I will say right now is probably impossible.
So, Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
based on that, my understanding that the president was going to something about May 11th. Maybe that's changed, but the date that I had heard before was May 11th when he was going to, I guess, release his authorities that he believes he has under the various laws. And so I get, to me, doing May remote, based on that, I think that would be okay. And also, until we know what HVAC possibilities are, I think it's hard to make a decision whether it's prudent, to hold live public meetings.
So I had heard May 11th too, and then today I heard he signed it, but I don't know what that means. He signed it and it's going to be May 11th, or if he signed it and it's immediate. So I guess we can plan on the first meeting in May being remote and hopefully make a decision by the workshop.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I think that's a good plan. I think that makes sense.
Okay, since I'm deciding, I guess we don't really need a vote then. So that's the plan.
President Ziegler.
Manager Crafton?
So where does that leave a committee that might want to do an in-person meeting?
That's a good question for Mr. Smith. I don't know.
Well, Mr. President, managers, I think the one thing we've counseled is taking a consistent approach, that if, we were in a situation before where the board was clearly wanting to continue to meet remotely given pandemic conditions. And if you start to hold other meetings in person, it suggests that it is practical and prudent to meet in person. So I think we're wanting to be consistent and kind of work through an approach to this. I guess my recommendation, it's not the only way to handle this, but my suggestion would be, let's get the information from the administrator and legal counsel all together and then proceed and make a decision about approaching these things so in a way that would cover both board meetings and committee meetings in a consistent way.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments on this topic? Okay, the next.
Mr. President, and I'm sorry, and I know maybe some meetings, are conducive to be in person, but one thing I point out is I like the remote meetings only because I can have my stuff on my screens. And also I can see everybody's face, because in our current configuration, I can't see people's faces. And to me, that's important. And so I know there's a plan on, hopefully there's a plan on configuration that would help, solve that issue too, and how we configure the meeting space.
Okay. The next item is our discussion items. And then it looks like we have a closed session as part of that. But the first thing is Manager Cook's grievance with Administrator Jaffrey.
Yes. Does Administrator Jeffrey want to go into closed session?
Do not.
Okay, very good. So noted. Well, Mr. Jeffrey, at least in my opinion now, is 3 times engaged in unprofessional emails. The latest being sending an email in response to my request about a questionnaire on the annual report, stating that the questionnaire was created internally in response to indefatigable critique, obviously aimed at me. And I believe that on that basis, 3 times is enough. And Mr. Jeffrey has continued apparently not to understand what it is to be professional. And I, in fact, offered Mr. Jeffrey an opportunity to rethink his email, and I got no response. So I take it he did not rethink his email. And on that basis, then, I believe that Mr. Jeffrey should be removed as our administrator for that reason, and also for the reasons that I have sent, again, multiple requests for information under the Minnesota Data Practices Act, which he has not responded to in a timely manner as required under the Minnesota Data Practices Act. Thirdly, he has been in violation of the open meeting law on a continuous basis by not having materials available to participants in the meeting for their review during the meeting. So on that basis, then I move that Mr. Jeffrey be removed as the district's administrator.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Okay, motion fails for lack of a second. Is there any further discussion on this item? Okay, no further discussion on this item. The closed session, I believe, is Mr. Smith's request. Is that correct?
Microphone.
Yeah. Mr. President, managers, I really would defer to Mr. Jeffrey on the status report that he may have. If he does have a report, and I think he does, then it would be appropriate for a closed session for the purpose of developing a potential offer for the potential acquisition of the property that's listed there in the agenda, 9955 and 9875 Spring Road, Eden Prairie, with a PID number 281162232005.
Mr. President, I move we go into closed session.
I'll second.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook,
I make a friendly amendment to the motion to include in that motion the recitation made by Mr. Smith regarding the specific purpose of the closed session.
Fine.
I believe that's a friendly amendment.
Yes.
I see some nods. Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Spiegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, so Administrator Jeffrey, are you going to put us in a closed session, or how's that going to work?
Staff back, and we'll
Okay,
put people into the waiting room. Yeah. All right, let's start letting people back. Yeah.
so basically, we're just going to vote to continue this meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Is that way back down? So
Mr. President,
Manager Cook,
I move that we continue this meeting until 6 p.m. on the date of the workshop, which is
April 20th.
April 20th of this year.
I have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any more further discussion? So we're voting to continue this meeting. What was the date and time again? 6 o'clock.
April 20th.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
So
Okay.
don't forget to set your alarm.
Don't worry. Thanks, everybody.
Yes, thanks
Thank you.
everyone.
Take care.
Good night.
Okay.
Good night.
Night all.
How do I get out of this?
Good times. Good times.